This week on the Frame Savers, never laugh at live dragons. Am I the dragon in that scenario? Okay.
Well, this is episode 76 of the Frame Savers, and we are excited to once again be live on twitch.tv/the Frame Savers. If you are new to us, we are a retro video game podcast that focuses on speedrunning. Speedrunning is a hobby where we try to beat video games as quickly as possible using whatever tricks, glitches, or stratagems we have available to us. And this week we are going to be talking about the Hobbit for the GameCube. So this is a game you might think, oh, here's a filler episode from the Frame Savers. They picked a random game. They want to talk about it. This has been in our list to talk about for like 2 years. So I'm maybe longer, maybe since the beginning of the episode. Or of the podcast. I don't know, but excited to finally knock this one off of our lists. But before we dive into that, what have you been up to, Chad?
Oh boy, I've been. Have I even played video games anytime recently? I played some Super Mario World the other night. That was pretty awesome.
Yeah, you did a bit race.
I did do that bit race. I've been playing some La Mulana now that the release of La Mulana 2 seems really, really imminent. I'm trying to get done with it. So I've now upped my game to playing it once a week instead of once a month. So
Oh, nice. Well, eventually, maybe in a couple years, you'll beat that game.
I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to finally finding out what the words La Mulana mean.
Yeah, that sounds awesome.
What have you been up to?
I did a couple of Final Fantasy speedrun attempts. Final Fantasy VII did not go well. Did not go well at all. Made me realize I don't want to do it. Don't want to run that game right now. Emotionally can't handle it. I casually beat FF6 for the first time, so that was a lot of fun. And I've been playing a lot of Pokemans lately, so I picked up a little bit of Game Boy Quest and decided to do the next Pokemon's game. And so for some reason, I've decided I have to beat both red, blue, and yellow because those are different games for some reason.
What's wrong with you?
So yeah, so I've got problems, but it's been a lot of fun. You get the Pokemon and then you just hit the A button for a couple hours, and then you get another Pokemon and you do the same thing. It's a very good game. Very good game.
I just noticed that our notes say speed running with a space in it, and that's really there we go.
Yeah, it's in other places too, and it's probably because of me. Sorry, everybody. So, we've got some cool community events coming up. However, we've got Midwest Speed Fest 2018. That'll be August 3rd to the 5th. They're raising money for SAVE, which is a charity dedicated to the prevention of suicide. So, really good cause. You can find them at twitch.tv/Midwest Speed Fest. And also, the UK Speedrunning Marathon's coming up. That's August 17th and 19th. Yes, the Brits, even though they're a gloomy people, generally just sipping their tea, watching it rain, some of them do play video games, and they will be raising money for special effect, and that provides gaming equipment for accessibility, so that's really cool. You can find that at twitch.tv/UKSM Live, so definitely check both of those out for sure. But why are we talking about The Hobbit, Chad?
So this is a game that I actually discovered not in any particularly glamorous way. I think I just stumbled across a speedrunner at the time named iRule, who was playing this game, and I thought it was fascinating. And so for those of you who are familiar or are not familiar, Golden, who's a pretty prominent member of the speedrunning community, puts on this event pretty much after every single GDQ now. That's the timing of it, is right after every single GDQ. He puts on an event referred to as the 12-hour challenge, where you're supposed to learn a game that you have no familiarity with within 12 hours and put up your first run within that time span. And this was actually the very first game that I ever picked for the 12-hour challenge. So it kind of has a special place in my heart. It is one of those games that has some really fascinating tricks and tech in it. They're very easy to explain what the tricks are, but the way that they combine together to make a really interesting speedrun route is really fascinating to me. So this is a game that I've always had a lot of love for. I haven't always run it. It can be a fairly brutal speedrun if you're bad at the game like I am. If you're good at it, then this is probably a real joy. But for me, it's really challenging. So I haven't run as much as I'd like, but I'm planning on picking it back up, so I'm going to get into it again. And it felt like no time like the present to finally get to talk about this game.
Yeah, I mean, this is a game that Chad has been passionate about for a really long time. I remember watching him doing RTA attempts of this years and years ago. It's kind of cool to do this episode so much later because it does appear a lot has changed in the speedrun route and such. It's really been pushed to a pretty low number speedrunning time wise, and it's really cool to see it get optimized. I will say that it's kind of cool that I did not realize this was your first ever 12-hour challenge, and we probably should have announced this in the community events, but I think 12-hour challenge is coming up very soon.
Yeah, by the
Do you
time
know
the
when?
audio version of this episode releases, it'll have already passed. But for those of you who
Okay.
are listening live, it's coming this weekend. So that's the weekend of what's the weekend coming up? The weekend of like the 28th. Um,
Okay.
that's
Yeah.
this weekend. So that's the only reason we didn't announce it. If you're listening to this live, definitely check out the 12-hour challenge. Super duper good event. Helps out the community in a lot of ways, getting people to try new things, become more and more like your inner author blues, and play random
Mhm.
stuff that you may
Yeah.
never play again. But
Yeah, this is they always have prompts. This prompt has never been in a GDQ, which is something that me and you don't struggle with. Our games don't get into
mm-mm.
GDQ, so all the games we want to speedrun, that's fine. But that might be challenging for some people. So go through the TFS backlog, see what random weird episode we talked about, and try one of those games maybe. But
Yeah.
I want to point out, you say why the Hobbit? That's the question we're answering right now. Most of it's because you speedrun it and stuff, but I came to a realization close to the end of preparation for this podcast in that Bilbo is the purest of speedrunners.
Oh goodness. Please tell
Yeah.
me more about
Think
this.
think about it. So the Lord of the Rings series is about a lot of things. It's about, what's most important to you? Is it adventure? Is it treasure? Is it romance? Is it being a hero? And Bilbo skips all the gold, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
that's a favorite thing, because it says at the end, it's really supposed to be like kind of touching, I guess, is that Bilbo didn't care about the riches. He just cares about food and like camaraderie or something like that. But really, what does Bilbo care about in the speed run? You see him run past all the money, all the glory, and he just wants to clip out of bounds. He just wants to save time. So Bilbo really is the purest speedrunning person. Look at
That's
all the
true.
stuff he's passing up,
That's a really
all
good
for
point.
time.
It's a good
Yeah.
point. You end
So
up running right by all these giant diamonds and gems in every single level. And it's like I don't have time for that. I just need to be. I just need
the
to be at the
thing
end.
the thing that matters most is time to the frame savers. So speaking of that, we're going to take a quick break, listen to some music, and then Professor Chad is going to teach us about the Hobbit.
So, talking about the Hobbit sort of exists at an interesting time. This was around the time where the Peter Jackson films were becoming popular initially. So, it's kind of interesting the way that this game fits in with all of that. So, it was originally developed in 2003 by Inevitable Entertainment, which is a company that was bought by Midway in 2004 to eventually become Midway Studios Austin. And this group had only published a few games, or developed a few games previous to this. They had made Tribes Aerial Assault, and they had made Defender, which was a PlayStation 2 port or sort of reimagining of the
Yeah.
old arcade game.
Yeah, there was a whole huge series of these, and Midway, I think, was involved in them. Didn't research this, but I believe they were. There was a whole kind of reimagining of all the original Atari games. There was like a Pac-Man reimagining. There was a Frogger, like 3D game, and so it's just kind of funny that like they wanted to see if they could get those properties alive again. Kind of like Mario had always stuck around, through all the different iterations. So it's funny to see
Yeah, a
that they
few of
worked
those
on
worked pretty well
Defender.
too. Like the Frogger ones, I don't feel like were ever particularly popular, but the Pac-Man World is a series
Hmm.
that's super popular in its own right, even
Yeah,
outside the popularity of Pac-Man. So it's kind of interesting the
yeah.
relative success that they
They
experienced
had
with
a
that.
Centipede one as well. I have a
Mhm.
bunch of them on PS1, but
That's really cool. So the game was published by Sierra Entertainment, which was a property that was held by Vivendi Universal Games, and
same Sierra as all the computer
I believe
games.
so. Yes,
Okay,
the same
so
exact
that's why
one.
some of the puzzles are obtuse. I got
Yeah.
it.
Impossible to solve and probably kill you if you mess it up. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
exactly what you get from The Hobbit.
Yep.
So, what sort of makes it interesting is that Vivendi held the video game rights to Tolkien's literary works in conjunction with Tolkien Enterprises, which is a company that was holding the rights to certain assets of the Tolkien universe. It was sort of the property management company for J.R.R. Tolkien. And in collaboration with them, Vivendi held the rights to specifically the literary works. But despite Peter Jackson's Fellowship of the Ring releasing in 2001, they didn't really cooperate in this way, and Electronic Arts actually held the video game rights to that game, or to the movie series. And so,
Mm.
because of that, Vivendi ended up pushing forward with a game based on The Hobbit, as to not really directly conflict with the movies coming out at the time. And so they ended up basing this game on The Hobbit, which, if you're not familiar, is the prequel to the Lord of the Rings trilogy of books. It was targeted toward a younger audience. It was a much simpler story.
Hmm.
It had a much lower reading level. I remember in middle school trying to read Lord of the Rings because I was a pretty avid reader at the time, and I really couldn't bring myself to push through it, but The Hobbit was a lot easier to deal with, and I think
Yeah.
that was ultimately their goal.
Yeah, that it's interesting. So basically you're saying EA had the rights to make basically any Lord of the Rings game that was based off the movies, kind of
Right.
like the Lego games get released based off of the Harry Potter movies or whatever. And Vivendi had the rights to anything based off the literary work. So they could have made a Lord of the Rings video game
Well, in
just the
fact, they
same, but it could
did.
not have been based. It could not have had like visuals that represented the movie actors and stuff like that. It would have had to be in its own imagining, just
Absolutely.
kind of, which would have been really confusing if they released this game 2 years after Fellowship of the Ring came out. Fellowship of the Ring was a huge hit. This was like a big deal that the Lord of the Rings movies came out. My dad, he said he used to read all of them every year. I don't think it was every year, but he read them all the time. He had the Silmarillion. He was really into these things. So when the movies came out, he had been telling me about these books since I was a kid, and I read The Hobbit, I think in like 96 or 97, like when I was in middle school. Like you were saying, we had similar experiences where and I did finish it. It's fairly long, but it's a really easy kind of, like you said, child friendly read. And so like when these movies came out, it was a big deal. So it'd have been real confusing if Vivendi came out with a Lord of the Rings game that didn't have the Legolas and all the things that everybody had just seen. It probably would have gotten a lot of criticism, I would think.
Well, to that point, a year before this game came out in 2002, WXP Games, which was what does that stand for? Something experience, but I don't remember what it stands for. But it was released under Vivendi's Black Label Games, and it was a Fellowship of the Rings game that was released between movies 1 and 2, but also unrelated to the movie series as
Wow.
well. And it did not get very good reception, probably for exactly that reason. It was a Fellowship of the Rings game coming out shortly after the Fellowship of the Rings movie, not based on it in any way. I imagine this was probably the world's worst stocking stuffer at the time for
Yeah.
parents who heard that their kids wanted something Lord of the Rings and they bought this, and their kids just had no idea what to do with that. So
What system did that come out on?
it was PC is the version I know of. It may have come out for some other consoles, but it definitely was PC specifically.
It's just funny to think about getting a physical PC game to put in a stocking. That's the funny thing.
That's true. You'd have to have a pretty big stocking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, so this game is an action-adventure 3D platformer with a considerable number of puzzle elements and pretty basic hack-and-slash combat. The stages are designed in a pretty quest-oriented way, so every time you enter a stage, you're given a high-level objective, and there's even a quest menu when you pause the game. And as you sort of progress through the level, you're given smaller quests that end up spelling out your path to completing the level. And so the side effect of this is that a lot of the early stages tend to be relatively linear, and the goals are very clearly outlined. So you'll enter a stage and it'll say, you need to get to the end. And then as you progress through the level, you realize that there's a bridge out on your way there. And so your new quest is fix the bridge. And it keeps doing that over and over, very clearly outlining to you what your expectations are at all points, which I think in a lot of ways makes this a very simple game. A lot of the
I had a lot of issues with that quest, by the way.
Yeah, I know
A
you
lot
did.
of issues because this guy's son stole his hammer, and then he's just like, get the hammer from my son. It's like, he's your son.
Yeah,
Like,
that's poor discipline.
There's literally a bridge down, and like the one toy you're letting your kid play with is the hammer, and you're just leaving the whole rest of the town to be bridgeless. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And it only takes 3 nails to do it. I mean, it's just like,
it's not like there was a lot of work to be done, apparently.
I felt like I got caught up in that family's drama, and it wasn't fair. I had nothing to do with that. I shouldn't have been involved.
It's an unreasonable expectation. You're not their nanny. So the stages do actually end up following the book quite closely. In a very general sense, a lot of the story is pretty well told out through the gameplay, but some of the stages are actually extended to round out the gameplay experience. Stages that wouldn't have made a lot of, or chapters that may not have made a lot of sense were sort of fluffed out a little bit so that the gameplay was a little more enjoyable. But all along the way, developers were under very strict orders to not deviate significantly from the plot. That's probably the side effect of working with Tolkien Enterprises and having rights to their literary works, is they're constantly keeping an eye on you. And in fact, Tolkien Enterprises actually employed several Tolkien scholars to work with the game developers to ensure that the game remained true to the lore. So they had people on staff at all times making sure that the game, even in situations where it deviated, didn't deviate significantly.
First of all, this is good because, number one, you've got to respect the lore.
Absolutely.
Got to respect
That's the
lore.
number one rule.
Yeah, I mean, if you're not respecting the lore, what are you respecting? But secondly, I felt like this did really reflect in my gameplay experience. Now, again, it's been like 15 years since I've read The Hobbit, so I'm not like so in tune with it like I might be, say, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone or something, where I'm like, oh, well, they left out this small story or this was different. I'm not that intimate with it, but it did feel exactly like what Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, was. You know, it was a lot of traveling through caves, a lot of the story and plot seemed to be fitting things. And then I really like, I mean, we can get into this in the reviews, like they have these small like cartoon sections in between each one of your objectives or missions, and those are in the art form of kind of a children's book that you're looking through. Like they're animated and they look really good, they look really gorgeous, and walk you through the story as well. There's voice acting walking you through the story, and everything, you know, things reminded me of stuff that I had read back in the day. So that was cool. You know, you do get a lot of video games based off of especially like superheroes and stuff, where there will just be like, or movies where there's just a lot of things left out, a lot of liberties taken, and it felt like this did really stick to the source material, which is cool, because then you are feeling like you're experiencing the book that you read rather than, you know, just some. I think it felt like it rung more true because it's a book, maybe.
Right.
Like if I watch a movie, something might not have to emulate something as closely, but like when you read a book, you really get into that world, and it felt like they fleshed that out well.
Yeah, basing it on the book, I think ends up being really good for the game, because if you base a game off of a movie that's based on a book, I mean, you're going through several levels of editing and content removal. And at this point, like, you're so close to the source material coming from their literary works. And it really seems like Vivendi and Inevitable Entertainment had a pretty good handle on the license in the sense that they had the same... I feel like in a lot of ways they had the spirit of Tolkien in their design, because I was reading some notes talking about how some of the characters that they created for the game are actually not from the actual books. So that means that they created characters that the Tolkien scholars approved of, which I think that reflects well on them, that they were able to sort of institute their own ideas that the Tolkien scholars who are on staff were like, yeah, sure, this passes.
Yeah, like it fit the flavor, fit the theme of what would have been in The Hobbit if you were realizing it in some sort of, what's this village NPC look like, or what does this, you know, different scene look like, and yeah, so like that's definitely a big plus, and they didn't shy away from noting it or connecting it to the literary aspect because of the way like those middle scenes work. It's like flipping through a book and it's telling you the story, and someone's reading it out loud, so it kind of follows that.
For sure. So in terms of gameplay, throughout the game, you get access to three basic weapons. You have your walking stick, which you acquire at the very beginning. In the very first level, it's the dream world, so it's Bilbo having a dream, and you have access to all of your weapons. It's kind of a tutorial level in the sense of showing you how things work. But at the beginning of the game, you get access to your walking stick. After that level, you just have your walking stick. And throughout the course of the rest of the game, you get access to throwing rocks and eventually the sword, Sting, from the story, which is his blade that glows.
From the police.
Yeah, yeah, Sting from the police. You know, Sting,
Not the wrestler. A lot of people think it's named after the wrestler, but it's Sting from the police.
You know, Sting actually was named after the sword.
Is that actually true?
Yeah, 100%.
Oh, wow. That's
Please,
crazy.
nobody look that up.
Okay, so you made that up. Great.
So you can change between weapons at will. Your rocks do have limited ammunition, but in general, your weapons can be freely changed between using the D-pad on the GameCube controller, and I'm sure it's the same for other consoles. You have items that have limited usage, so you have potions that can refill your health, and you have storage upgrades. So at the end of every single level, you go to a vendor where you can spend the silver pennies that you find in levels on new equipment, so that there's things like buying potions, buying antidote potions, storage upgrades, so being able to hold more rocks or more potions, things like refilling your rock supply. There's a lot of items that you can choose from in this vendor.
Yeah, and some of the other like items that you can pick up can upgrade your rocks, for example, to make them freeze people or explode. There's all these different little pickups you can get that give you experience. So there's not like an overwhelming amount of items like most kind of RPG based games. This is an RPG, but it has RPG elements. But there's a lot of different variety. But for the most part, you're dealing with your stick or your rocks.
Right.
Or your sword, I guess.
Yeah, I think they tried, since this is based on a license that is a lot younger, and we'll talk a little bit later about sort of the cartoony art style that they were going for, but in particular, there's some quotes from developers about how they tried to translate that into the gameplay as well. So they tried not to bog down players with really heavy RPG elements and focus on more action-oriented gameplay style, just really quick hack and slash style. But there are RPG elements mixed in, so you can pick up gems that appear whenever you find them in levels, or complete quests, or kill enemies, or find them in chests. And these gems translate to courage points, and so every 1,000 courage points, which are sort of your experience that you collect in the game, you get an extra health container, so you're able to have more maximum health.
Yeah, and one thing I'll say, based on the RPG elements and this aspect, is that this game, and I'll probably talk about this a little more in the review, but it isn't like a collectathon, which I liked. I think of this game as early 3D, but I guess it's like 6 years into 3D. But a lot of early 3D platforms are considered, collectathons, and this game really doesn't have that feel to it. It's a lot more objective based, but also the courage points kind of add up almost like the Lego series games, like where like there's so many of them around that it's not like, it doesn't make it like a collectathon. You don't care if you miss some or whatever, but you just get a ton of them to upgrade. And so I found that mechanic pretty fun, because it does make you go hunt stuff down, but it doesn't have this level of collectability. Like, it doesn't really add up at the end or tell you so much what you missed. I mean, I guess it does tell you what you missed. You could definitely try and 100% it, but it feels like you wouldn't really feel motivated to do that, like in Banjo-Kazooie or Mario 64 or something.
Yeah, I was going to say exactly that. This being primarily a platformer with sort of hack and slash elements, instituting an RPG sort of system into that can be really challenging. But I think that the approach that they took was overall probably the best one you can ask for, because placing courage points throughout the levels encourages exploration. Giving enemies the ability to drop them motivates you to take on combat that is otherwise unnecessary. When you find chests, you're excited to potentially uncover more courage points. Some of the quests are optional, and so you get more courage points for doing those. And so it motivates you to do a lot of the RPG types of interactions that you otherwise might just say, well, this is a platformer, so what's the point? I'm just going to go to the end of the level. But by giving you an actual tangible incentive, hey, every 1,000 courage points you get, you'll get an extra health container, like that starts to become worthwhile.
Yeah, the heart containers, I mean, you only start with 3 hearts, and I mean, 1,000 courage points takes a while. Like, you're probably not going to get that even in one level. Even exploring it's probably add up over like 2 levels. So that, that it does feel like you've really earned something when you get an extra heart, but it's also very useful. Like, you actually want that extra heart. And then you don't get bogged down into other RPG elements. There's no way to like upgrade any sort of, oh, my stamina's going up or anything. It's just basically based on your hearts, but
Yeah,
it
it would
does
be
it in a
so
really
easy.
clean, simple way.
It would be
Yeah.
so easy to institute something like, okay, you leveled up, so you get to run faster, or jump higher, or something like
Yeah.
that. And the fact that they actually showed the restraint to not go that
Yeah.
direction, I think,
I
is a
mean,
really
it,
good.
it could have been cool if they went a little more in that direction or found a way to make your combat more varied, because the combat is very simple in this game. I mean, I guess I'm getting into some of the rating stuff as we talk about the format, but the combat is really simple. But this system does encourage you, and it's really good game design because the small blue gems lead you kind of like Mario coins to where you need to go, and that's really useful. So it's using these experience points to kind of guide you, and then some of the larger upgrades like the large diamonds, or there's a bunch of other different types, are kind of hidden in remote areas, and sometimes there's a little puzzle or little kind of exploration where you have to figure out how to get somewhere that you don't necessarily know just by seeing it. Will reward you with getting these larger diamonds, kind of like red coins in Mario, or maybe other different power-ups like extra lives or whatever. So that's kind of fun. But what do you think of the mini games, the skill mini games? Because when you do find a chest, you get a combination of many mini games, upwards of 8, and they're a variety of timing your button press basically based on a meter on the screen, or some sort of circles are lighting up and you have to wait till one lights up green to hit the button, and you
Yeah, I
can't
mean,
mess any of them up.
in the story, Bilbo is the burglar. He's supposed to be someone
Mm-hmm.
who's able to break into things, and so in the game you can find brown chests occasionally, which will just open, and they usually just have a few courage points or maybe some rocks or something like that in it for you to pick up. But you'll find blue chests quite often, which are locked chests, and they have a variety of different difficulty levels. The relatively simple ones, might only have 2 little mini games you have to complete in a set amount of time, but the hard ones might have 8 in them, and it can vary anything from having a ton of courage points, or it could even be as high as finding a skill scroll that will enhance your abilities, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So it incentivizes you to explore in that way and really balance the risk, because these locked chests, some of them are very easy to pull off and some of them can be quite challenging, and anytime you fail a locked chest challenge, it explodes in your face and you take some damage, which might
Yeah.
not be that big of a deal if you have a lot of health at that point. But if you're down to your last few hit points, or
Yep.
you don't have a large maximum health, I mean, that can be putting your life on the line at that point, just trying to
Yeah.
open that.
Yeah, I died to a chest, not realizing until that point that it does like a full heart of damage. And health is really limited in this game. Like, I did die a good bit of times playing it casually, so that risk is actually kind of real. Kind of forgot that Bilbo was like the locksmith, and that was like part of the story of the Hobbit, and that does make it like a really cool game mechanic to add to this game, to
Right.
kind of flesh out that story mechanic of he's the burglar, he needs to be able to unlock the chests. This mechanic for me always gets old. I don't think there's a good way of doing it. It just always gets old. And like, Mass Effect is one of my favorite series, and they did this for a lot of their different puzzles when you're accessing something, or doing all kinds of times whenever you're doing something, you have to do a very similar type of mini game. And it's just like, it's really cool to add that kind of gameplay. I think the intent behind it is pure. Like, I don't think it's, hey, let's pad out this content. I think it is really trying to add another layer of like, oh, you're hacking in. But there's just never been a game that I've played that has really been able to utilize that idea. I'd love to see somebody be able to do it, because it's like, I love the idea behind it of like making it feel like you're hacking in, but it always ends up feeling just like the same thing over and over.
Yeah. So I'm being corrected. The brown ones can sometimes still be locked, but they just don't hurt you when you fail it, which is actually kind of a neat twist on that mechanic. But in addition, I mean, there's some games who have done it well. Games like Fallout, for instance, where you actually do have like the leveling up of skills specifically. Once you level up your lockpicking skill, if you find a lock that is a sufficiently low level, it just automatically unlocks. but this
Yeah.
game not having like individual skills like that can't really
Well,
achieve
I
that
guess
sort
what
of
I'm
thing.
trying to say is I like the idea of adding gameplay to unlock a chest. Like a lot of video games have chests or boxes or things that you find items, and like, adding this mechanic of, oh, you're a locksmith. A lot of games have done that. Like Resident Evil did that, where Jill could pick locks and Chris could not. There were RPGs way back, at least 16-bit era, where you'd have somebody who was the thief and like he could unlock stuff, and so that's cool. And I really like the idea of adding like an actual interactive gameplay to that. I've never played a game where that interactive gameplay didn't get old after like 3 chests, and it was like I love the idea, and I would love somehow for a game designer to make it like an engaging aspect of the gameplay, but I don't feel like anybody's ever been able to do it. It's
Yeah,
like making a fun auto scroller. Like they're like challenges where it's like certain things you get tired of pretty quickly, and getting it so that it would be something you'd look forward to would be really hard to figure out, I feel
yeah,
like.
I think that's always the challenge, is that sometimes a fun gameplay mechanic, as soon as you see it enough times, you're tired of it, especially
Yeah.
when it's something optional like this, where you don't have to open every chest. And so then you start to perhaps, and I think this is always a failing of the game design when this happens, but when you start to make the decision to not engage with additional content just because you're kind of bored with it,
Hmm.
if the chests are going to be optional, if I'm like just tired of doing the lockpicking minigame and I choose to not open the chest, I don't feel like that's a failing on me. That's a failing on the game design.
Yeah,
Like maybe there could have
absolutely.
been more inventive ways to handle that
Yeah.
mechanic.
And I would love to see a game, what I'm saying is like where you would actually look forward to that hacking mechanic. Like, oh, I'm hacking in, like each time is fun. But like I don't know how to do it. If I knew how to do it, I'd be a good game designer. But I haven't seen it yet. It's never come across my radar.
Sure.
So
So a few other things. This game does have very liberally provided save pedestals. There's save
mhm.
pedestals pretty much everywhere, and you're hard pressed to find too many locations in the game where the game just isn't providing them often enough. In reality, I think one of the things that does make this game somewhat simple, and we'll talk a little bit about that when we talk about difficulty in the ratings. But I think one of the big complaints that people often have is that this game is a little too easy in terms of the casual experience, and one of those reasons I think really is the ability to more or less save scum your way through the entire game. You can save at a pedestal right before any encounter, beat up all the bad guys, save again, move forward just a little bit, save again. There's no disincentive. The game doesn't disincentivize you to do that in any way.
Mhm.
So it's sort of a natural side effect that you're probably going to save more often than you would really need to, and it makes the game a lot easier. You never lose any progress, and so there's no downside to playing it risky, because you're not going to lose any progress.
Absolutely.
And then finally, the last mechanic is after you beat the level called Riddles in the Dark, which is the level where you encounter Gollum and take the ring finally. Once you have the ring, that includes a new mechanic in the game of stealth missions. There are some levels later in the game where being noticed by certain NPCs or certain enemies is just an instant quote unquote death. Like the level just ends instantly. And so the way that you overcome those is with the ring. And the ring, when you put it on, makes you invisible. It has this really neat screen effect where Bilbo goes kind of translucent. You can still see where he is on screen by his outline, but you can see through him, which indicates to you that he's invisible, and it also adds this kind of silhouetting to the sides of the screen. And as you walk around, it loses charge, and the only way you can charge it back up is by taking the ring off. So you can't just run around invisible all the time. You have to kind of do it judiciously by turning it on and off as needed. And it does kind of incorporate some interesting mechanics. I think that having a stealth section in a proper platformer where the stealth itself, I think that one of the downsides of stealth sections in a lot of games is usually when you're in your stealth mode, your movement is very restricted, and this game doesn't really do that. When you're invisible, you can run around, jump, do anything you want to just as fast, and so the stealth sections don't really feel clumsy and stodgy and like they're a big burden on you. You're just basically turning on your ring to run through a room, and when you're out of that room, you turn it back off. And so I think in a lot of ways, this game does the stealth thing right.
Okay, so you would prefer that than the trade-off of like, oh, I'm in stealth mode, but now I'm crouched and I'm moving slow or whatever.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of the make me move slow, so I have to spend, 3 times as long in this room just to get to the other side so I can end the stealth portion. Like,
Sure.
I just don't like it when it slows down the gameplay considerably. So
I do though. I think that's really what sells the stealth section, right? I mean, like that's the whole like okay, we're changing our mindset. Now we're Metal Gear Bilbo and we've got to, tiptoe our way through whatever. Like I feel like I shouldn't just be running to the next spot, stopping, running to the next, I don't
sure,
know. It sells it a little bit more, but I understand it gets old. It gets old for
sure.
sure. I'm not a huge fan of stealth
It
sections.
definitely fits the theme better in this case because in most games, stealth is like I'm crouching, I'm trying not to make a
Hmm.
lot of noise. But with the addition of the ring, which makes characters invisible to mortals, it kind of works a lot better because there's no reason for Bilbo to need to walk slower.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean they do use that mechanic in the section with the trolls. Like you actually have to walk slower. You cannot run or walk during a certain section of that or you get caught. There's a stealth section early on in the game if you haven't played it, which you probably haven't, where you have to stealthily walk around these different trolls and stop at certain rocks and some of them you have to walk, some you have to run. And that's all without the ring. So like in that section if you run then you get caught in certain parts. But yeah, if the ring were a real thing and you could put it on and be invisible, why would Bilbo crouch around or whatever? He might as well run faster than normal even.
yeah,
Like I mean, so that is realistic and kind of cool that they do that. I just think as a power up, it would be sometimes as a gameplay mechanic. Having like a stealth power up, you should have a trade off because it's like I'm gaining the benefit of stealth. So what am I losing? And generally,
right,
that thing you're losing is, mobility, agility, speed, whatever. But
sure,
in this game, I guess if you want to respect the lore,
which you should.
always respect the lore. Then you gotta let him move around as fast as he can.
Exactly. The ring mechanic is pretty straightforward and kind of nice. In the levels that require it, very often the game will force you into close quarters with the people that you're sneaking around. And one thing that it does that I guess is relatively true to life is that even when you're invisible, if you bump into a character, they'll notice you. And so it sort of implements some of the challenge that way.
Yeah, absolutely. So this game actually received mediocre reviews, I guess. I think of 7.5 out of 10 is really good because
Well,
I'm
it's
used to our scale.
IGN.
But so IGN, that's like worst game ever made. It's 75% of the way there.
Yeah.
But described by reviewers as painfully average and uninspired gameplay. Isn't that like the worst thing that you
Yeah.
could be like accused of?
That's
Like,
that's always my big criticism is that a
yeah,
game I would rather a game be like abjectly terrible than to
yeah.
be boring.
This is why
And
you like me. I'm not boring.
no, you're just
I'm not good.
you're just
I'm
terrible.
not, but I'm not painfully average.
No, absolutely not. One reviewer said it's 10 hours of a fairly easygoing platform slashing with well-spaced save points, and young gamers might get something out of it, but for the majority, it's just not good enough. I think that this game has a lot of mechanics that make it pretty fun. I can see where they're coming from. Like, if you're walking into this trying to get like a proper Lord of the Rings experience, at its core, this game is just a hack and slash platformer without a lot of the sort of the depth and rigor you might expect from the Lord of the Rings universe. But I think that's one of the things that makes this game really special is that it feels like it does kind of stick to its roots. Lord of the Rings is the adult story, and The Hobbit is kind of the child-friendly introduction to it. And I outright disagree with these reviews, but maybe they're a product of their era. 2003 was, I mean, how many years before the end of the GameCube life cycle? Maybe their expectations were just particularly high.
Yeah. Well, speaking of reviews, we're about to do our reviews in just a moment after you listen to some music, but we'll get to decide if The Hobbit cuts the mustard or not. So each and every week, we take the game that we're talking about, we break it down into some ratings just to kind of discuss it as a casual experience. We go through the graphics, the music and sound, the controls and gameplay, difficulty and fairness, fun and replayability. Woo! And then we give it a final score, 0 to 10, 0 being the lowest, 10 being the highest. Using the non-IGN scale, we have given games 0.5s and we've given games 10. So we will start off with the graphics. Chadwick, if that is your real name. Is it?
No.
Okay.
It's
Yeah,
not.
That's not a real name at all. What do you think of the graphics of this game?
So I always thought that this game was based on the cartoon from the 70s, but it's really not. It does sort of bear a passing resemblance, but it's not actually based on it if you compare them side by side. I think the graphics are really cute, though, in a lot of the same ways. It's really lighthearted take on the Tolkien universe. Even characters that you might expect. You've seen them in their more adult form in the Peter Jackson movies. This is just a really cartoony, fun take on the game itself, and I think the graphics do look really good. Even for the era, I mean, I don't know if I expect the graphics to be much nicer. Me and John were talking about this before we started recording that there were a lot of games in this era that they use their cartoony nature to hide imperfections. I often look at Wind Waker for that, where maybe the graphics aren't particularly great, but because of how heavily stylized it is, it ends up looking good as a side effect. And I think that that's the case here, is that the really cartoony nature means that I can't really properly assess whether or not the graphics are really sharp for the GameCube era, but I think that they look good ultimately.
Yeah, I think I'll disagree on this one. I think the graphics are a bit amateurish. Like, if I wish I had looked up a bunch of stuff before this concerning like what games came out around 2003, because I think
Right.
of this looks like early 3D to me, like early PS1, early like N64, maybe a little bit better than that, of course, but like ultimately for this era, I feel like should be more polished. I really like the graphics in terms of the cutscenes in between. Like, I really like the graphic style of like the art, the hand-drawn art that they do for the book flipping pages and telling the story.
Right.
I think that looks really good, but the rest of the actual game is pretty uninspired to me in terms of like nothing stands out. All the levels look the same, which is pretty obviously faithful to the book. They're like basically wandering through caves most of the book, so like it's hard to say like differentiate that, of course. But I felt like kind of the environments were kind of samey and kind of boring, and the different sprites, not sprites, I don't really know what to call them, polygons, what do you call them when it's 3D? Models, I guess. Just most of the character models, the enemy models, the boss models are all just kind of, it was okay. I mean, it's not terrible, but it's not. I would think 2003 would have been better.
There's certainly ones that are all over the place.
Yeah, I just don't find it so like when I think of like Wind Waker or Yoshi's Island or something, like I think of those as stylized. Like this, I just don't feel like has a unique enough look to cover up some of those flaws. But I don't think it's terrible, but it's just early 3D to me.
Yeah, that makes sense. The developers were quoted as saying that the art style of the game was influenced by Super Mario and Legend of Zelda games. Like, that's kind of what they were shooting for, which I guess meant they were shooting for some of the earlier Super Mario and Legend of Zelda games.
That's what I'm saying. Like, it reminds me of SM64 and Ocarina of Time. It doesn't remind me of like Mario Sunshine.
Well, they're certainly more polished than Super Mario 64. I think that that being as early as it is, I think it gets a pass. But that being said, I would not compare it that far back. But I understand where you're coming from. It definitely has the higher resolution that you expect from a game of its era, but maybe there is some more polish that could have been done. It's so hard. You're absolutely right, though. I kind of wish that I'd looked at what else was out at the time to kind of be able to compare it to whether or not they were keeping up with their competition in that space.
Yeah, like when I'm trying to look up when Mario Sunshine came out real quick, because like to compare it to that game, Mario Sunshine came out the year before this game, and like Mario Sunshine looks worlds better than this game to me. I could be wrong, but to me, Mario Sunshine's bright, colorful, like cleaner sprites, less polygonal looking, just way more advanced. And that was the year before on the same system. So I just feel like for 2000, if this came out in 97, I would have given it like a good thumbs up. But in 2003, I feel like this is a bit kind of like, I mean, this probably came off to people as a more under budget title, of course, too. It's not like this was a AAA. I mean, Midway makes good games, but they do a lot of remakes and stuff. It's not like this was like a game that would have been announced at E3 and people would have been like, oh, I mean,
Yeah, I think
so
they had a demo at one of the
probably
E3s,
wasn't pushing
but
the technology.
yeah, I don't think that that was their goal anyway. It
Yeah.
seems like there was a lot more focus on sort of their relationship with Tolkien Enterprises and being faithful to that than necessarily like pushing the system to its absolute
Yeah.
max.
But like if this had as good of graphics as Mario Sunshine, that would have been really cool, in my opinion. Like Mario Sunshine has way better graphics than this, and could have been cool to flesh out this environment a little bit more, cleanly. But what about the music and sound?
So, some background. We're trying to do better about plugging names of composers and things like that. So the game's score was composed by Rod Abernathy, Dave Adams, and Jason Graves, and it was recorded live with the Northwest Sinfonia in Seattle. And the team was given a budget to create 75 minutes of original music. Each of their tracks were actually sent one by one to Chance Thomas, who was the director of music at Tolkien Enterprises, who would send them back and give advice. So they went through this sort of rigorous process with Tolkien Enterprises to make sure that the music was faithful to the to the text. And then sort of talking about accolades that they received in 2004, the Game Audio Network Guild awards gave the soundtrack the award of best original soundtrack. So that's just a little bit of background on the music for this game. I actually think that the soundtrack is fantastic. It's gorgeous. It's really, really well done, in my opinion. A lot of the stages have a very unique feel. All of them sort of tie together with some of the same motifs. If you listen through the whole soundtrack, you'll hear very similar motifs used in each of the tracks to sort of tie it together into one cohesive experience. And one of the things that this game does that I really like is they've very clearly recorded sort of complementary tracks for both sort of exploration and for combat that the game seamlessly transitions between based on whether or not Bilbo is in combat or he's just sort of wandering around. So the game sort of picks up on you being in combat and smoothly transitions into that same location in the music wherever it was, but the combat version of the music. So
That's really cool.
It's kind of neat the way that it does that. I like the music for this game.
Yeah, I think you're probably a little bit more familiar with it, especially having speedrun it, but I enjoyed it playing it. It's nice to hear like acoustic guitar and stuff. I mean, we do so many retro games that are 8-bit, 16-bit, so when we get to do the games that are CD quality music, it stands out obviously when we get to hear like actual instruments and stuff. And so
For sure.
like, as a guitar player, it's nice to hear the cool acoustic guitar playing and stuff like that. There's a lot of ambiance to it. I don't know if any tracks really stood out to me as like bangers, but it's all really well written and stuff, and I haven't sat down and listened to the soundtrack as a whole, but just clicking around the video trying to remember, most of it was really good. And along with music and sound, I would say voice acting. That's the other thing that's cool about this game. It has voice acting, which is not something a lot of the games we review have, because we don't do a lot of I guess this is more modern, but the voice acting I thought was pretty good. I'm not super picky on voice acting. Some people are real picky where they're just like, oh, that voice actor's the best and this one's terrible, and like, as long as it's not Resident Evil 1 to me, like, I'm probably not going to notice if it's good or bad, but I thought it was well executed. I don't know. What do you think?
For sure. No, I'm exactly the same way. I don't consider myself very picky on voice acting, and because I'm an American, I'm not really well versed in a lot of different accents, so I can't really speak to whether or not, the characters' accents were faithful to the sort of dialects they were attempting. But in general, I think the voice acting's a nice touch. It definitely doesn't go the Bubsy route of just like hitting you so often with it that you're just really sick of it after a while. It's always in these really tasteful spots where Bilbo will kind of say what he's thinking or say what's going on, and it's always sort of it's always well tied into the quest that he's doing or what's going on around him, giving you a little hint or a clue to something you may not have noticed, or highlighting something that it wants to highlight. So I think it really does a great job.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. And I also really enjoy the dialogue in between quests when they're reading the book. Like it's a nice tone, like your grandfather sitting you down telling you a tale of adventure, and it's got the pages swinging through. So I like the voice acting. It's always nice to see something. It's not something I get to experience as much with doing so much retro gaming, and It's a nice little touch. I thought they did a good job with it, and so music and sound definitely would get strong thumbs up from the old John Carls. But controls and gameplay, I think these are two kind of really different questions for once, now that we're in the 3D world. But let's start with the controls, as the resident speedrunner.
Um, I think that's tough. I think that speedrunning almost hurts me in this sense because whatever challenges there might be with the controls, I've certainly acclimated to them more or less,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
so they don't stand out as much to me. I guess the question is for you, a casual player, did you feel like what you wanted the character to do translated well through the controller to the game? I feel like the game translates okay. There's definitely some little movement glitches in the game that make for a frustrating casual experience. Things like you kind of want to use the long jump and the long jump will fail you sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Things like, sometimes just navigating around on uneven flooring can be very frustrating.
Yeah.
Just really simple things like that. It's not always clear whether or not you're going to be able to jump high enough to grab onto a ledge or what ledges are even, grippable. Just little things like that, I think, institute a lot of frustration for the casual experience. But overall, I think that at least in my experience, and unfortunately as a speedrunner, I don't think that I can give an unbiased answer in this sense. I feel like the game does an okay job of allowing me to translate my thoughts into actions in the game, which is really all you can ask for.
Well, I felt like you were asking me that question, but I'm pretty sure you just answered all of the things I probably would have said anyways. So those are struggles with it. Also, I would say the camera is really frustrating. You constantly have to be moving the camera. It never really adjusts for you very quickly. Like, I think it gradually adjusts for you, which maybe that was intentional to not make it so jarring, but a lot of times you'll just be the camera will be facing the wrong direction. You'll be manually trying to control it back into place with the C stick. Or I think it's called the C stick
Yeah.
on the GameCube controller, and I felt like I was just constantly, like, I was playing like dual analog basically, which is cool, but it just wasn't working the way dual analog works in 2018.
Yeah, you and I played through this casually a few days ago in preparation for the episode, and I remember you raising that, and I don't think I had ever really noticed it. I've played a wide variety of 3D games that do the 3D camera to varying degrees of success, and I think that this is one that does it passably, but not as good as it could be. There's definitely, games like Super Mario 64, where despite your complaints about the camera, it does a pretty decent job of at least trying to stay behind Mario. But
Mhm.
with this game, you're absolutely right. As you sort of turn corners, you feel like it's necessary for you to help the camera out in moving around because it's not going to, wind around behind you properly.
Absolutely, I would agree. In terms of the gameplay, I would say I really like that it's not a collectathon. So that's like the
Hmm.
main thing I would say. Like, I felt intrigued enough to be like, oh, I talked to this NPC and he said to go get this. Let's, like, even though it's a side quest, like, let's go do it. And maybe that would have gotten old if I had actually been doing all of them. But at least at first, having a quest log, doing all that stuff. I mean, that really reminds me of a lot of modern games. That's kind of what a lot of modern game design's built around. Go play Fallout, go play Mass Effect, go play any of those games. You generally have all these different side missions where it might just be, I mean, everything ends up devolving down to the same couple of gameplay elements, right? It's kind of like writing music or writing a story. Like, there's only so much room to be creative, right? And do
Right.
something that's never been done before. And so, like, in that sense, I liked that. That was a lot different than a lot of the criticisms I have for earlier 3D games, which is that they're usually collectathons. Usually most of the stuff isn't as rewarding and it's very repetitive. So I don't know if it would have gotten to that sense if I had been doing all the missions or trying to get all the things, but I did like that. I'll say, in terms of the rest of the gameplay, I mean, it tries to do a variety of different gameplay, which is cool. Like we said, you have to do mini games to unlock chests. We talked about stealth sections. There's also little puzzles where, like, for example, famously, the stone giants are throwing rocks at you, and you need to get close enough to something that their rock hits it, and that'll open up the path to the next thing. So there's like puzzle solving, there's platforming. So it tries to do a good variety of different gameplay throughout a quest. I feel like, where you're bounced between combat, which is more like the Dynasty Warriors combat, just like hack and slash. You've got your puzzles, you've got stealth, you've got these mini games, you've got boss fights. So it tries to mix it up, and I think that's good. I'd say the combat's a bit lacking. I think the combat could be better. It could not
I mean,
just
it's your
better.
standard hack and slash. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just you compared it to Dynasty Warriors at one point, where it's just
Yeah.
like run into a group of enemies and just start swinging.
Yeah, and I think that's fine, but like the hitboxes and like the control over the swinging didn't feel like one of those games, so it could get frustrating. It was real easy to get like stun locked a bunch by just getting bounced between plants or enemies. It's really hard to know what your reach is on your swings, and like your swings cool down a bunch. So like after you do two, like there's a big gap in time in which you can then start getting chain reacted against. I actually enjoyed the combat, but I would say objectively it's probably not the greatest design combat. But overall the gameplay, I feel like it's trying to do a lot of different things, and maybe it doesn't like excel at any of them. There's not Zelda level puzzles, there's not even Dynasty Warriors level hack and slash, there's not really good mini games for the hacking, but altogether the experience is at least trying for something.
Yeah, I think that sort of trying to put it in context. So this game was built with Inevitable's multi-platform in-house game engine, because they were told that they were going to release on PC, Xbox, GameCube, and PS2. And so they built a game engine in-house that would allow them to design the game once and release it on all of those different platforms. And I think that probably informed a lot of the limitations for them. And I think given that context, the variety of different types of gameplay that they added in can be seen as a little more impressive. But I can definitely understand, especially from the combat perspective, as sort of rudimentary as it is. And that being said, I enjoy it, albeit it's fairly rudimentary. I think that that's probably where the descriptions as painfully average come from, is just because if you can't do platforming necessarily perfectly, and I think platforming is really the one place that it excels at, if it excels in any particular area.
Mm-hmm. I'd agree.
And then, if your combat engine's not particularly great, and maybe you're bored of the hacking mini games and, the quests or whatever, like it's easy to look at this and just write it off. And I think I can understand where some of those reviews come from.
I mean, it's like the puzzle isn't like a deep solving puzzle like you'd get from like Water Temple. It's like, go get these 4 items and then put them in the thing. Like, go get the 4 gears and you go get the 4
Well, I don't
gears
know
and
if I
you
would
put them in the
necessarily
thing.
use Water Temple as my litmus test.
I've never beaten Water Temple, so I don't know. I'm just
I mean, the whole puzzle's literally like, hey, did you find a key over here? Bring it back here. Like that. Now you know the Water Temple puzzles.
Yeah. Okay, but like some Zelda puzzles,
Sure,
I guess
sure.
I should say. Like you can. There's some creative puzzle levels, like specifically Link's Awakening. There's the one where you have to like knock down the 4 pillars, and so like that's really complex to figure out how to get this ball to the different locations. Bring it. Like all the puzzles in this are basically like find the place where the puzzle ends, or find the thing and then bring it to the thing. Like it's pretty simple. So the platforming is probably where it shines the most. I did enjoy the platforming quite a bit, and I think talking about controls a little bit again, like the long jump does feel good. Like it feels cool that you can do some different things with the bow, and you're jumping and charging up your bow, and then you lunge forward, and so there's things that you can do, and that makes it interesting. It definitely makes it much more interesting, of course, in the speed run, which we'll get to, which utilizes those movement techniques and the bow techniques to break the whole game. But it is a decent platformer. I think some of the other stuff's below average. In terms of difficulty and fairness, you were saying that you think it's pretty easy.
Yeah, I think that there's some stages that are fairly challenging. Boss fights and general gameplay in the level called Flies and Spiders. Some of just navigating riddles in the dark. I think some of the stages can be seen as more challenging, but in general, there's such a liberal number of save pedestals that I have a hard time thinking of this game as particularly challenging.
So I want to approach that from a different perspective, because you said that earlier, the save pedestals. I mean, the big criticism with retro games is that the way it makes it challenging or punishing is that you have to go back and replay the whole level if you fail. So it's not necessarily that the challenge in the level is so hard, it's just that the stakes are high, right? Like if you fall on spikes in Mega Man, now you have to go back to the last checkpoint or whatever, as opposed to this where you get and so like I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing that you can save constantly. I mean, we just talked about a game that we praised for that very reason in Celeste, right?
Well, I mean,
Celeste,
I'm
you
not
never
saying that it's
go.
bad. I'm saying that it's easier
No,
because of it.
no, I understand. I'm just trying to comment on this because I
Sure.
found it an interesting thing. Is that
Yeah.
like Celeste, we praise for the same thing. The same
Right.
thing is that you never have to redo more than one screen. Like you resave at the beginning of the screen all the time. Every screen is its own level essentially.
I think the individual
But
challenge of each screen though is very different.
exactly. So that's what I'm saying. So the challenge in between these save points is really what we're commenting on.
Sure.
Like the fact that it has a ton of save points would be fine if it had Celeste level challenges in between each save point. If it was actually something challenging that you were overcoming and now you want to save in that spot. But because a lot of it is just, you know, literally like you walk to the next room or you make a couple of jumps, you know, there's not a lot of difficulty you're overcoming that you're getting rewarded for those save points with.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you fix it in one of two ways. You either have fewer save points or you make
exactly
the space between save points more challenging.
And I think that having a lot of save points is my preferred thing. I like that. I'd rather you make it more challenging in between. And so like I don't want to criticize this game for the amount of saves it provides. I think it just should have made itself more challenging in other ways. And the combat is challenging. I mean, I did die a good number of times, whether it was due to platforming because you can fall in water a lot, or due to combat because combat's kind of derpy. And so I would say like I felt like it was an adequate level of challenge. I'm maybe not as good of a gamer as everybody, but I thought it was okay. But you know, I could understand. I mean, if you're expecting a 40-hour experience or something, then yeah, of course. But I think it's pretty, you know, easy to beat the game. And there's a lot of different stuff to it, right? Like there's all these different quests you can do. You can try and 100%, and you can try and get all the courage points. You can try and do all those.
That one reviewer I quoted earlier said it was 10 hours of fairly easygoing platforming, and I'm like, we played for 4 hours and only got to flies and spiders. So I wonder how good of a gamer that guy was that he said he beat the whole game in 10 hours.
I mean, I could see. I mean, we were probably on pace to beat it in that time, right? Casually.
Yeah,
I mean,
especially if we hadn't been screwing around so much.
Yeah, maybe a little less, but like that's not all the different content though, because there's all these. We were just trying to beat it. We weren't doing any of those side quests, and you can criticize them as not being interesting, but at least there's a decent bit of content to go back, and maybe it is a lot of fetch quests or this and that or combat, but at the end of the day, adding all those different objectives and different collectibles does give a lot of replayability. So that does add to the gameplay as well, and you know, so for fun replayability, we kind of just answered it, but I found it fun, to be honest. I did actually want to go. Like the platforming was challenging enough. That's you know, me and you love platforming, and I was interested enough to at least have if I had that game as a kid, or if I didn't have a million other games I'd rather play, I would want to go back and do some of those challenges and maybe 100% some levels and stuff. But you know, I'm not going to because it wasn't that engaging. Like there's a lot of other video games that have existed since then that I want to play right now. But you know, that's telling that in 2018 I was still like, I wasn't miserable for 4.5 hours. I had a fun time, and I kind of wanted to keep going.
I think for all of its shortcomings, this game's a lot of fun, and it does have, you know, for being more or less a bog standard 3D platformer, does have a considerable amount of replayability, I would say. It seems like there's a lot that I might want to try doing, you know, try 100% levels, try, you know, beating the levels without gaining any courage points, or figure out what you can do in that regard, and just the quality of the gameplay in general, you know, for all of its ups and downs. I think this is the sort of game that if I had had as a kid, I would have beaten the game and said, okay, I kind of want to play it again. So,
or try and beat the game without going out of bounds, because I don't think you've ever done that.
No, I've never done that. Yeah, when we sat down to play it casually the other day, I got so frustrated with the level Riddles in the Dark that I told John, I'm just gonna skip this part, and I just went out of bounds because I couldn't take any more of the like 30 minutes I was on this one section. I was just not even challenged by it. I felt like I was just, you know, sort of working out my mental map for how to navigate the area, but I was just like, I kind of don't want to do this part anymore, and I'm going to move ahead.
Yeah, that's tough. That's a tough part because I have a terrible sense of direction. I'm like famously so. Like I just get lost all the time, and this game is all caves, so like it's really hard to remember what. Like I was circling around a lot, just being like, wait, I've been going through the same loop for like 20 minutes,
right.
But like I still didn't have my mind bearing on like which rock room was different than the other rock room. So,
right.
But yeah, what about final comments and score, my friend?
Well, I guess I'll go first as far as the score goes. Um, I think ultimately I'm going to give it the IGN 7.5. I do think it's a really good game. I think that I can sit here and talk about all of its shortcomings in every single department. You know, they didn't do this part right, or they didn't do that part right, or it would be really cool if they added this feature or that feature. But at the end of the day, like, this game sticks in my mind not just because the speedrun itself, but like the game itself, I think has a really great style to it, and it's a lot of fun to play. Even if you're not going out of bounds all the time, I think the game itself is fun to play in a lot of ways. And I think that it does deserve a pretty high score in that regard. I think that considering the fact that they were competing with Peter Jackson, you know, having his own grip hold on the Lord of the Rings franchise, I think that this game ultimately did a pretty good job with what it had.
So strong recommend from chat.
Well, it would have been a strong recommend one, or I could have given it a 3 and still strong recommended it.
Yeah. Okay. I got you. So your numbers mean nothing. That's what you're trying
ultimately
to tell me.
No. I'm just saying
we got to get rid of these numbers.
I'm just saying numbers.
I'm gonna give it a 5.
Okay.
Yeah, I think this is an exactly average game. I had fun with it, but I tend to have fun with a lot of video games, so I really shouldn't get too caught up in that. And outside of some decent music and like, if you're not a big Hobbit fan, I couldn't say you have to play this game. You know what I'm saying? Like, it is a game that exists with other games. You know, like, maybe if you've exhausted all your 3D platformers, you've beaten all the Spyro games and Ratchet and Clank and Mario's, and you're just like, I need a 3D platformer, sure, but like,
so this is your only if you were the last game on Earth game.
No, I mean, like, it's just a game. It's just a game that's good. I enjoyed playing it, and that's great. I was thinking 5.5, but I'm trying to be more like, let's be decisive with this. And like, I did have fun. I think the music's good and all that stuff, but at the end of the day, like, I can't imagine that I've had too much more or less fun with any, like, if I just threw a rock in a room, you know, when like all of the 3D platformers hang out in a room together, right?
They always
they're
do.
All they're drinking cocktails and they're, you know, telling tales and talking crap to each other. If I threw a rock in that room and hit a random one, I would imagine it would be a lot like this game.
You're saying that there's a 50-50 chance you'd hit a game you'd rather play.
Yeah.
Okay. No, I respect your grading system. Imagine that all the games in the world are in a room and you throw a rock. How many of them would I prefer playing? No, I get it.
So it's probably 50-50.
It's a good system.
Yeah. So, but I would say if you're looking for a 3D platformer, definitely dive into it. I would say the speedrun definitely ups that number. Like, the speedrun is infinitely more interesting than the casual playthrough, I would say. And if you're looking for a cool broken 3D game to dive into, this is the kind of game that I would recommend strongly, because I think it's really cool. It's really underrated in terms of its, you know, speedrunning presence. And so let's go ahead, take a quick break, and then we'll dive into that.
So for those of you who are watching with us live, my buddy Christian just posted in chat the history of the Hobbit speedrun, and I'll actually be including a link to that on our Twitter and in the show notes as well, so you can take a look at it. He's done a really great job of compiling a history of the speedrun, extending really, really far, even earlier than the first recorded speedrun of the game, just sort of discoveries that happened even before then. And if you're kind of a history nerd like I am when it comes to speedruns, this is definitely a page that's interesting to check out, because you can see the way discoveries happened and the way that it affected the speedrun over time. So strongly would recommend that you check it out, and I'll make sure that I include links to that both in the show notes and on Twitter. But I'm going to run through kind of a brief synopsis of that history. I'm not going to bog you down with every single discovery, but I'm going to hit the high notes. So the very first video of this game in terms of glitch hunting was in August of 2007, when Pyro found a way out of bounds in one of the early levels. I think it was in Roast Mutton, where he found a way to get out of bounds and actually found the first alternative end of level trigger in the game. So he got out of bounds, sort of jumped around a little bit until he found a place where the level just ended. And that really, on its own, is probably the most important discovery for this game, is that sometimes when you get out of bounds, you can find spots that either where the level has not properly loaded, or where there for some reason is just an end of level trigger that shouldn't be there. But the discovery of that, I think, opens the doors to a lot of discoveries that follow.
It's really cool to see that the history of glitch hunting and just like, I guess, kind of speedrunning for this game goes back to 2007, because I mean that's forever ago in terms of speedrunning time. But also, you know, when I think of games being run back then, I think of like, okay, of course people are trying to beat Mario games as quickly as possible, Zelda games as quickly as possible, but it's cool to see that somebody was trying to break, you know, this GameCube game that was 4 years old at this time. So it's not retro, it doesn't have nostalgia, and it's just kind of there. So it's really interesting to see that. And I think it speaks to how really cool this game gets once you start breaking it.
Absolutely. Yeah, and so there was sort of a lull in time all the way up to February of 2011, where Kazooie, who some of you actually may be familiar with that name, Kazooie is primarily a Zelda glitch hunter. If you go to Kazooie's YouTube channel, it's just full of videos of the discoveries of lots of different glitches through 3D Zelda games. And Kazooie had uploaded several videos of some pretty early routes for the first three main stages. Usually things like finding a spot where you can get out of bounds and then jumping back in bounds to find the end of the level. Pretty simple things, and a lot of them sort of reflect in the way that the routes look even now. So for an Unexpected Party, for instance, one of the earliest levels, Kazooie's video follows the river all the way up to the top of it, jumps across it, and then walks all the way back down. Of course, the speedrun now can just jump straight across it at a much more convenient spot, but even back then, the goal was just be on the other side of the river. If the quest in that level is to fix the bridge, finding a way to not have to fix the bridge and get onto the other side of the river, sometimes it's what you gotta do.
Those people in the village need a bridge to get from the one part to the other part.
Then that son should learn how to parent better.
He's playing with the hammer.
The father should learn to parent his son better then.
Yeah.
So in July of 2012, Rockmox uploaded a video of a relatively early route for Riddles in the Dark that was later improved upon by Christian McCartney, who is Christian, who is in chat right now. 2 days later, Rockmox also posted a video of what he referred to as the teleport glitch, which is what we now consider to be clip warping. So the term clip warping is the name that we use for a glitch where essentially the game keeps track of your last safe location. So this is a really early 3D platformer where there was a lot of potential for accidentally clipping out of bounds in inconvenient ways or getting stuck on some piece of geometry. And so it seems like the case that the developers decided that the best way to fix that was to try to identify any time that the player was in sort of an unsalvageable position, some situation where they were either stuck or they were out of bounds and couldn't get back in. And when the game identifies that happens, it puts you back at the last safe location that it found you. And so how does the game decide that you're in a safe location? Well, you're in a safe location if you're ever standing on the ground for 50 frames or more. And so the discovery here was that if you sort of stand in a spot and then continually jump to some other location, and then get yourself stuck on something or in some other situation that the game deems unsafe, it'll actually warp you back to that spot previously. So it has to be somewhere that you've already been, but you can actually end up warping over relatively long distances. And the video that Rockmox had uploaded showed him setting his clip warp position in one spot, jumping over 50 feet away, and then getting himself stuck on a rope such that the game warped him back there. And this was a pretty significant discovery as well, realizing that while you can't use this to teleport just anywhere, it has to be somewhere that you've already been, you can use this to travel long distances, especially if it's a level that involves any backtracking. So this was a pretty significant discovery. And a week later, a thread for this game was opened on Speed Demos Archive by Rockmox. And this is where sort of the discoveries from this point on were held. Anytime someone found something, a lot of these will appear in the old SDA thread. And when I post the link to the history of the speedrun, there's actually a link to that SDA thread, and it's kind of interesting seeing old names that you might recognize if you happen to be an old school fan of the speedrunning community, just seeing those discoveries as they happened through.
It's crazy that people back then were posting to SDA on their typewriters.
I know.
Going to and from work in carriages, and just how far we've come.
Connecting it to their car phone, dialing up on their modems.
Yeah, the messaging each other on Hotmail Messenger. It's crazy.
Yeah. So in February of 2013, Ace Prune discovers an early version of a sequence break in the level called A Warm Welcome that skips directly to the basement. And this glitch is what we now know as, or what we now refer to as a save jump. So a save jump is essentially this game as a 3D platformer does have fall damage. A lot of people have issues with 3D platformers or platformers of any type having fall damage. And so the glitch here is that you want to get down to an area that's considerably below you. And so jumping down there would just kill you if you jump there naturally. But if you can jump down and aim at a save pedestal and save right before you hit the ground, you can reload from that save point safely. That's kind of the simple explanation for that.
Can I go back about 20 minutes and complain about fall damage in a platformer for like 15, 20 minutes?
It's too late. You already gave your 5. You can't turn into a 4.
Dang it. Yeah, no, that's really cool. I mean, how hard is it to execute saving before you hit the ground in that case? Like,
it can
do you have to mash quickly? Do you have to time it? Like,
it can be pretty challenging. I'm sure that a better player can time it properly. I always mashed it, and I had about a 50-50 chance of getting what we sometimes refer to as the zombie glitch, which is where the game will let you save, but it lets you save more or less on the same frame where you take the fall damage. And so you actually are saving the game at 0 health. And so every time you load at that point, you're just instantly dying, which is kind of
saying there's a chance.
Yeah, it's kind of tough. It's kind of tough to pull off, but it's a really cool glitch, and it opens the door to a lot of things. Now, the save jump actually isn't, I don't believe, in the speedrun anymore, because the only place that it was used in the speedrun now has a much easier route through that level that doesn't involve that at all.
It's funny as we go through the history. Chad watching the video, before we were starting, was just like so jealous. Like, he was like, "Oh, look how much easier this level is." And he's like, "Oh, that level's a lot harder." It's like I could see the wheels turning in his head about like, I gotta come back, and we gotta learn all this new stuff.
So. Yeah, it's kind of exciting. It's always exciting when there's new discoveries in a game you've played, and considering how long it's been since I've played this game regularly, and Christian has just been a beast at work finding all of this stuff. So now, like, coming back at it, I'm looking at the speedrun and I'm like, I don't recognize the route through any of these levels. It's completely different now.
Yeah, it's cool because I remember watching you run it quite a bit, and I remembered a couple of these tricks. That's like, even though it was several years ago, that's how, this game stood out in my mind, just because some of the tricks are really cool looking. I remember one specifically on the docks level where you would jump just into whatever, the ether, and then land in another building, and I think have to do that save thing before you landed, and then it would respawn you into this whole different part. And it was a really cool trick. Now that's gone because some other out of bounds has been found. So but it's really cool to see. I mean, this game is so broken to watch. If you take anything away from this, it's a very visually interesting run to watch, because there's just a lot of sequence breaking, a lot of out of bounds, a lot of skips. And if you've played the game casually at all, like those levels, like realizing kind of some of the routing thought that went into that is kind of just clever and cool, like watching you jump across to skip the bridge entirely, or jumping up on these statues later on in the run that are just there, but you can actually platform between them and never trigger whatever load zone is needed. It's really cool.
Yeah. So if you've been following along, we started at 2007 and we're all the way up to July 2013, where the first recorded full game speedrun of this game actually finally happened, a 1:35:55 by Acepern. And that was where this game started. So this was now routes for all of the levels had more or less been decided. A lot of the glitches were understood, and this was our first real attempt at speedruns happening for this game. Shortly after that, in August of 2013, Simple Flips improved the world record of this game to a 1 hour 17 minutes 25 seconds. Shoutouts to Simple Flips. Shortly after that, October of 2013, a speedrunner named j.r.r improved the world record to an hour 14:37. Later to an hour and 4 seconds with some pretty new major skips, including an out of bounds that skips a very large percentage of the stage called Riddles in the Dark. So John probably remembers that level, going through all of the troll caves and stuff like that. And there's literally just 2 rooms that happen to be very close to each other in the level layout, and you can clip through the wall to get from the beginning of the game level to the end of the level.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I spent a lot of time in that level. That's the one where you fight like the wolf boss that spawns the little wolves and all this stuff. And I'm watching the speedrun, I was like, what happened to that part of the game? It's like it's completely gone. So,
yeah,
that's 14 minutes. I mean, so he took the time from 1:14 to 1 hour flat. So I mean, that's 14 minutes of time. So that's a lot that j.r.r pushed the game there.
Yeah, and in November of 2013, that was where the first sub-hour happened. So that was a 58:11 by j.r.r. j.r.r actually, did a lot of the pushing of this game for about 2 years. It wasn't actually, so in April of 2015 was basically his last PB for the game. He got a 38:32. That's how low this game had come, with a variety of new tricks, routes, levels, glitches that had been found, all of which you can see on the speedrun history. Christian's done a fantastic job of compiling, basically every discovery that was made with video reference to, the person who found it and their initial video of their discovery. So you can see all of those discoveries happening. And then in April of 2015, Christian sets the first world record he had in this game. So his first interaction with this game, at least as far as his records indicate, was in July of 2012, where he had helped with some of the routing for Riddles in the Dark. Now in May of 2016, he sets the world record with a 37:57 and continued improving it like an absolute beast all the way up to 28:12 today. He has found a lot of new glitches, tricks, routes, and with some help from a few other players. There's a few other names in recent history who have sort of helped with the process, but Christian is definitely the driving force for pushing this game as low as it is now. So it's now 28 minutes and 12 seconds with the tricks that are known. A lot of the setups have become easier. Some of the easy levels became harder. Some of the harder levels became shorter. It's just, it's amazing how much this game has changed since I even ran it back in probably 2013, 2014, something like that.
Probably 2014. Yeah, that's awesome. Did you ever hold the world record for it?
I never held the world record. I've never pushed it that far down. That was when the world record was still, I think when I was running it was when the world record was in the low 40s, high 30s, and my PB is like a 54 or something like that.
It's 47.
47? Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so I never got it particularly low, but I do want to go back and learn a lot of the tricks and improve my PB. I don't necessarily know how far I'll go with it, but the game's too cool to not learn all the new stuff that's been discovered.
Those could be some easy gold splits coming for you very soon.
Splits.
Like, remember this whole level we used to play? Now we don't do that anymore. Yeah. So that category that you've been talking about, for the most part, is any percent no menu glitches, correct? Like, that's kind of the main category for this?
Yeah, and so all of that history there was pertaining specifically to the console version. The PC version actually differs pretty significantly. I think he actually has a history of the PC speedrun, but it's seen a lot of differences just because of some of the glitches are very different. The way that you can do clip warping is completely different in that game. It has, I think that was where menu glitches were first discovered, so that kind of took over for that platform. But in general, those were all console stuff, and that was all any percent no menu glitches, like you were saying.
So that's kind of the main category we've been talking about this whole time. But there's a couple other different categories that stand out. I mean, there's an all quests. So does that mean all of the side, like every side quest?
Every side quest in the game.
Okay, so that's like not 100%, but like kind of like the spirit of 100%. I would feel like.
Yeah.
Then you've got any percent menu glitches, which is 2243. So that's an extra almost 5.5 minutes. Off of,
every one of these world records, by the way, right now is Christian. So
okay. And what does the menu glitch entail?
So there's a menu glitch in this game where you can actually force the game to sort of spawn multiple menus on top of each other by exiting the menu and hitting L and start at the same time kind of gets the game to spawn multiple menus on top of each other. And so a trick you can do with that is if you sort of save in the level that you want to skip, if you just want to skip a level, if you save in the level that you want to skip and go back to a load for like an unexpected party, so the very first level in the game, and spawn a whole bunch of menus on top of each other, and then load back to the level that you came from. If you enter a cutscene and dismiss that cutscene within the correct number of frames, for whatever reason, it just instantly ends the level. So you have to find a save point that's slightly before a cutscene of a specific type, and then you have to basically load a save back to an unexpected party, which is the second level of the game, reload your save for the level that you were in, and dismiss the cutscene properly after sort of triggering this duplication of menus. It's
and
a lot of
about 5 minutes, 6 minutes.
Yeah, it's a lot of frame perfect tricks, and it's not useful in every single level, so the category doesn't just sort of devolve into this menu glitch. It's sort of like some of the levels that are short or don't have the appropriate cutscenes you still have to play normally, and the stages that have the appropriate cutscenes you have to do some frame perfect tricks in order to get it to work. So
sounds miserable.
Yeah.
Then you've got any percent glitchless, which I assume means no out of bounds, no
clip warping, no out of bounds,
warping.
none of those things.
And that's a 1:15:39, so a little bit longer than all quests because you're not doing all the quests, but you're not going out of bounds. So those are the combination. And then there's 100%, and this is the world record by no one is this stupid.
Yeah, I literally wrote in our notes, no one is this stupid. I'm sure someone will eventually be this stupid, but currently speaking, no one is that stupid. And what does 100% entail? Well, it's all finite courage points. So every courage point that's located in a level or that you can pick up from killing enemies or available in chests. The only reason why it's sort of specified as finite courage points is because every level except for the last one has a finite number of them. In the last level, you can actually get an infinite number of courage points. So in that level, you don't have to get courage points. All silver, or you don't have to get an infinite number. You just have to get the finite number. All silver pennies, so you have to find all of the silver pennies in every level. You have to open every single chest in the level. You have to get all quests in the level. You have to find all the training scrolls in the levels, and you have to get all the carrying capacity upgrades from the vendors. So it's a heck of a lot, if I'm being totally honest.
It seems like a lot of time to spend playing The Hobbit on GameCube, but Christian in chat says, I'm currently being that stupid. I've been routing 100% for a few months. So that's a good use of the last few months of Christian's life. So go give him a follow, please. He could probably use the support. But yeah, that sounds like a lot of things. That could be a very long speed run for sure.
Yeah.
So we've kind of gone over the whole history of the speed run and the different categories. So we've talked about a lot of these different, tech. So let's kind of, I guess, go rapid fire. Can you just explain? So we've said that a lot of this is going out of bounds, triggering save points, stuff like that. So what is slope boosting? That'll be the first part of tech we talk about.
Yeah, so almost every glitch sort of loops back to being a question of how do we get out of bounds. That's I think that's the biggest thing. And so the first trick is called slope boosting. So slope boosting is when you either use a long jump or use a walking stick slash or a sword slash in order to hit a slope in just the right angle to kind of boost you up it. So a lot of times, rather than giving you invisible walls to keep you in bounds, the game will just give you really steep slopes that you're not able to walk up. But just due to some of the weird physics in this game, if you long jump up some of them or slash your sword or slash your walking stick in the right way, you can sometimes get up to the top of the slope, not too it's not too difficult to pull off. So that's kind of what that trick ends up entailing. It's really useful. You can use it in a lot of places, in some relatively clever ways. But it has its challenges as well. It's not always easy to pull off, and usually it's fairly dependent on finding that right angle and getting the timing just right with your slash. So, for instance, in the very first level, one of the routes, at least that used to be used, I'm not sure what the current best route is for that level, but the route that at least used to be used was in the first level, you're supposed to kill a bunch of enemies so that a ladder falls down, and that ladder takes you to where the trigger is for the end of the level. But the glitch that the speedrun at least used to use was there's this very small piece of scenery that has a slope on it, and you slash your walking stick while facing backwards against it, and it'll push you up the slope really fast and take you to where the level trigger is. So there's a lot of these happening in some levels. For instance, you can slash and just like slide up a wall, and that'll take you enough out of bounds that you can end up working your way out of bounds pretty well. There's also clip warping, which is what I described before, this idea that the game keeps track of your last safe location, and then by sort of jumping around a lot. If you ever watch a speedrun and you're wondering why is that guy just jumping over and over, that's typically the reason why. It's trying to preserve that safe location. And then just clipping on some, piece of geometry or finding a way to sort of weasel your way out of bounds, you can warp back to that last safe location. And the reason why that tends to be so useful is because it's used in combination with the way that 3D platformers typically work, which is there's a lot of geometry, a lot of level to be loaded. And so what it'll do is sometimes you'll walk through a tunnel and it'll unload one part of the room as it loads another part of the room. And so you can use that to warp back to some unloaded portion of the level where you can now access out of bounds areas much more easily. And the reason why that's so useful for this game is that even if walls despawn or floors despawn or any of those things when you're away from them, the things that never despawn are things like key items that you need to pick up, interactive triggers or end of level triggers. And so if you can warp back to a space that has sort of its walls removed and you can jump into an end of level trigger, that's sufficient to beat a level. And so that's why that trick typically works the way it does. We talked about the save jump. That one's a pretty tough one to pull off. And so really all that remains as far as interesting things to talk about really are this movement tech. So a lot of times when you'll watch the speedrun, you'll see the person slash their weapon a lot, typically the walking stick. The reason for that is when you slash your weapon, you sort of get pushed forward a very small distance, but at a very high speed. And so if you can combine that with a jump shortly after it, I think it's like 2 or 3 frames after you swing your weapon. If you could time a jump just a few frames after that, you can keep that speed in midair and push yourself forward. And so that's the reason why you'll often see players, slashing their walking stick and jumping over and over. And you end up as a player eventually finding a rhythm for it. You kind of like hit BA, BA, BA over and over.
Similar mechanic to like Aladdin, where you're spamming something constantly to gain a small amount of time, but over the course of a good 20-30 minutes you're going to be saving a good chunk of time with it. But also the long jump is the fastest way to move, I would assume.
Yeah,
it is doing that, or
so it's the fastest way to move, but if you long jump on either level ground or on an uphill slope, you kind of get stuck when you long jump, and so you'll come to a complete stop before you're allowed to move again, and so that makes it really slow. But if you're ever going downhill, you'll definitely see players using the long jump. The long jump is incredibly fast. It gets you a lot of distance really easily, and it's very useful. And you can use it anywhere where you're on any sort of downhill slope, even if it's very subtle. As long as you're going downhill, that slope or the long jump will be faster. The only problem with the long jump is that if you're trying to make particularly long jumps, you'll sometimes encounter what's referred to as the long jump glitch. We call it the long jump glitch because sometimes you'll long jump and you'll find yourself just randomly in midair, just coming to a complete stop and falling straight down. And so if you're trying to use that long jump to either make it across a gap where there's a pit in between, or you're trying to jump over some trigger, very often you'll find yourself triggering the long jump glitch where you'll just lose all your momentum in midair and it ends up being pointless. One thing that has been sort of maybe not discovered is the right word, but at least noticed, is that sometimes the way that you move your camera can affect how often you trigger the long jump glitch. So for instance, in the very first long jump in an unexpected party, you'll sometimes see players either actively moving the camera or just pointing it straight down on top of the player. And the reason for that is because that seems to lower the likelihood of getting long jump glitched, as sometimes people will say.
Absolutely. So the cool thing about this has not been in a GDQ, has it?
Never been a GDQ.
Okay. So this is available for your 12-hour challenge if you're looking for that. That's the prompt, is never been in GDQ. And it's a really cool run because it's very broken. If you like broken, games, ones with heavy glitches, heavy out of bounds, this is the kind of run for you. It's really interesting how it's been routed using those glitches because they're so readily available. It's not like they're available in, 2 or 3 spots. It's really something that the runners of this game and the glitch hunters and all those people have put a lot of thought and time into, and outside of that, very low RNG, right? Very low other issues that you might run into.
There's some inconsistent tricks, but I definitely would not describe anything in this game as random. There might be some things that have an element of randomness, but that's definitely not the mitigating factor. It's usually the challenge of executing these tricks at a high level, and there's some times where these techniques will fail you, and like learning how to minimize the odds of that happening are kind of part of learning the speedrun.
Absolutely. So definitely check out the run. Also, if you do decide to run this game because you heard this podcast, please let us know. We've never really asked for that, but it's really cool when we get to hear that somebody heard of a game through the podcast and decided to run it. So definitely give us a shout out on Twitter or Discord if you do that. And speaking of our Twitter or Discord, we do have some Q&A lined up for you. So we're going to go ahead and take a quick break, gather our thoughts, and get the answers to your questions. So each and every week we try and answer your Q&A. We answer some questions that are live here on twitch.tv/theframesavers that you are all asking. And then we also have some in our Discord. We have specific channels set up for upcoming episodes. So you can see which episodes are coming up and you can ask questions about them ahead of time. And so we've got some questions from that. And so we'll start off here from Twitch. We've got Andy J. Retro asking, do you have recs in different genres for good 12-hour challenge games? So recommendations for good 12-hour challenge games for a first-time speedrunner, RPG, shooter, platformer, action, etc. I mean, you have a little more experience with 12-hour challenge. I've done 2 or 3 of them. I think you've done 4 or 5 of them. So
I think in terms of RPGs tend to be really nice in the sense that if you have really good notes for them, they tend to be doable on your first attempt. So the learning process can be as simple as just playing through it for your first time with those notes and trying to follow along with the planning and the routing that goes into the speedrun. So in terms of RPGs, I don't have a lot of really strong recommendations. I would say Final Fantasy Mystic Quest definitely fell in that category for me. It's a underloved Final Fantasy game, but it has a really great network of notes that make the game really easy to play just at a super straightforward, not necessarily world record caliber, but you can get your feet wet and do your first run in 3 hours where the world record's about 2. So
yeah, I think for 12-hour challenge, I mean, I maybe not be the person to ask since I did Final Fantasy VII for my last 12-hour challenge. Not the best idea, but I would say something between an hour and 2 hours is a good 12-hour challenge. I think people can sometimes make the mistake of picking too short of a game for 12-hour challenge. And what that ends up doing is you feel like you really have to optimize it. You end up being able to do tons and tons of attempts. I mean, I remember Darby doing 12-hour challenge for SML, and he got sub 13 in his 12-hour challenge, which is like only 4 people have done that or something. So it's like that's a 13-minute game. I recommend something around the hour, 2-hour mark, so that you get a couple attempts in. It's like a nice paced thing for 12 hours.
I would say it's definitely a function of how much time you want to spend as well. If you don't want to do the whole 12 hours, then a game that only takes 15-20 minutes might be the right fit for you.
Absolutely.
But if you want to go the whole 12 hours, John's absolutely right. You probably want a game that has some meat on that bone. Something that's 30 minutes to an hour is probably a reasonable length. If it's really tech heavy, something shorter is maybe better. But if it's a game that's not terribly challenging, you probably want something longer, because in that 12 hours, you really want to be able to focus on both the learning process and getting runs in. And if you find that you can learn the game in an hour, then you just have 11 hours that you're doing runs. And
you're doing 11 hours of RTA attempts. I mean, I did Wampum, and that is a hard game. But it probably only took me a couple hours to learn, and then I was stuck doing like 8-9 hours of RTA attempts, and that's I wouldn't recommend that. I didn't have as much fun doing that. Final Fantasy VII, I would say a bit long, with it being 7.5 hours for the world record. So but something like, I mean, Link to the Past is a tough example because it's really deep, but
you'll spend at least half of that time just learning it, if not way more.
You did LADX one time. That's a good 50 to an hour run. That's still a little bit tough. You want to look for something simple, but with enough meat on the bone that you're not doing RTA for more than half of the time.
I've definitely made the mistake of picking games that are maybe too ambitious quite a few times, and I love challenging myself like that. I think initially for me, The Hobbit might have been too ambitious. I think that now the speedrun has changed in such a way that it might make for a good 12-hour challenge game. If you're looking for a 2D platformer, Super Mario World is a really easy pick-up-and-go platformer. You can learn even the longer category, like 96 Exit. You can probably learn it in 3 or 4 hours and have plenty of time to do some serious attempts. If you're looking for shooters, I don't think that's an area me and John are super comfortable with. I know that the GoldenEye community has really good resources and a lot of room for working on ILs, so you might find that to be an interesting thing to do for a 12-hour challenge, but it's sort of an unconventional shooter as it is.
I would say if you're looking for action, James Bond 007 for the Game Boy. Let's do it. 50 minutes to an hour. You'll get your run in. You'll learn it. I think aim for something that'll take 6 hours to learn and 6 hours of RTA attempts. I mean, I think you'll not always, obviously hit that exactly, but I think you want to split the time between the two. I think if you end up doing 8, 9, 10 hours of RTA attempts, you're not going to really have as good of experience as, something where really I think a big part of the experience is everybody on the same weekend learning something, so it's the one time I feel like learning streams are actually a lot more exciting and viewable. Generally it's I want to learn this game offline and then do attempts live because people just want to see the attempts. So I think getting something that you can actually do 6 hours of learning for is cool. I always enjoy watching that part, and then you get to see the finished product.
Yeah, I would say that if you do have a penchant for RPGs are probably the best fit for 12-hour challenge just in general, because you don't end up getting bogged down in the learning more often than not. I find a lot of RPG speedruns are learned by doing your first run with notes, if you're not routing it yourself. So if you do particularly like RPGs, something like Final Fantasy VI Kefka at Narsh or Final Fantasy Mystic Quest might be a good fit, or even some of the really unconventional Final Fantasies on the Game Boy. So like Final Fantasy,
I was gonna say that.
Final Fantasy Adventure.
Adventure's really good. That's a really good. I mean, that's been at GDQ. It doesn't fit the prompt, obviously, but it's a really good.
Yeah, the prompt's just a recommendation, but
sure. I never follow it anyways, but I think I don't know if I did that for 12-hour challenge or not, but I learned that. No, I learned it at GDQ. That's right. I learned the run at GDQ, but that's a nice I think you could take 6 hours to learn that run and 6 hours of attempts for sure.
I would say, just wrapping up this thought, I would say, don't make the mistake of being that person who thinks they're going to route a game for the 12-hour challenge. You can route a game for the 12-hour challenge and produce your first run, and that might be ultimately what you're looking for. But if you're looking for the 12-hour challenge experience TM, then what you really want is a game that has pretty good resources already, people available who want to help you learn it. I found that some of my most fun 12-hour challenges were ones where the people from that community wanted to be in my channel to help me learn the game, because that gives you a lot of that camaraderie. It gives you a lot of that excitement. People kind of know what to expect, and you have a tutorial to kind of help you walk your way through it. You don't feel overwhelmed by, I don't think I'm going to be able to finish this in time, because you can look at that video and say, no, I'm halfway through the video, I can do this. So
yeah, I think I recommend anything that has a tutorial or at least a video of it. Like if there's no video of the run, like, because it's a real nice experience to have that up on your overlay, and people are able to see the, you know, the tutorial or the resource that you're using, and then go back and forth. I think it's a cool time because it also shows new speedrunners like how people learn a game. So you can watch somebody like Author Blues. You've run 150 speed games, right? Something like that. Like, you're very experienced at taking a game from I've never touched it before to here's my RTA PB, you know, and like you can watch someone like Auth go through that process. And so I think that's kind of what you want to provide. I mean, not everybody does 12-hour challenge live on stream, obviously. So that's a whole
absolutely not.
If you're viewing it as a streaming experience, which I think most people do, it's nice to have the tutorial there. Then other people maybe can learn alongside with you, or at least learn how to learn to speedrun, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
So our next question from Legs says, is it possible to quantify what makes some weird licensed games just so good?
Oh, that's so hard, because I can think of two examples that directly contradict what I think my opinion about this is.
Okay.
So I think that my opinion about this is that games that don't take the source material so seriously that they get sort of in the weeds on it. Like, think about some really bad licensed games, especially 3D, like modern era licensed games, ones where they feel like they need to incorporate every single scene from the movie in a level somewhere, and that doesn't exactly make for compelling gameplay. But then like GoldenEye 007 kind of tried to do that, and I think that's a good game.
It's a real good game.
And okay.
But I wouldn't say 007's a weird licensed game. Like, I don't know.
Oh,
we're
that's
talking
true.
about bad
That's true.
games. Like, if we're talking about bad licensed games, like stuff like Darkman or something. I don't know if this question maybe came off of the most recent TFS Pocket, which, if you haven't heard it yet, Chad did a breakdown of a game called Darkman, which is based off of kind of an anti-hero comic. It's pretty obscure, I would say. If you're not deep in the weeds of NES or Game Boy collecting, you've probably never heard of it. And so, like, these weird licensed games, what makes them good? I mean, anything, I would just say what makes any weird game good doesn't have to be licensed or not. It's just unique, weird mechanics or unique, weird gameplay. You know, I mean, like I think the fact that Darkman adds this tightrope mechanic, and the fact that you have to take pictures of the things, and that helps you gameplay wise, like those are the weird, quirky things about that game that make it a cool licensed game, right? Whether or not it's actually fun to play or not kind of gets separated from like, oh, I think this is good because they tried something, it's unique, it's different. And so, like, you know, that's generally what I look for in a weird game. Licensed games generally tend to not be that way. I think that's the problem with licensed games, is they try to fit this formula of like, here's the plot, like you said, and also like, so instead of focusing on gameplay, they're really just focused on the license. You know, they're not focused on how do I design a good platforming stage. They say, how do I make this sprite look like Yogi Bear so that people who like Yogi Bear buy it? And then they don't focus on the gameplay at all.
Yeah, I think that's
when you add a quirky element like Darkman does. I think other games do that too. I'm trying to think of examples, but like when you add that quirky part that ties it into, you know, the lore, into the product you're licensed from.
It's like Toy Story for the SNES that incorporated like being inside the claw machine, and so you got like a Doom clone, and then you've got driving around in the race car, and it's not necessarily following shot for shot scenes from the movie, but it's like within the same universe, and it tries to create compelling, fun gameplay, which I think that game has a lot of complaints of its own, but in general I think it does a good job of taking the license and making a good gameplay experience.
Yeah, with license, you want to trigger, I mean, maybe not nostalgia is the right word, but like whatever makes you love that actual original property. And so like something like Toy Story makes you love that because you see all your sprites, all your different characters that you loved. You see the different scenes that make sense. But the gameplay might not be all that great, right? But at least they tried with changing the gameplay up to meet those scenes in the movie. And so I think that's what makes licensed games fun for me. I mean, like, Alien 3 on the Game Boy was a really good licensed game because it was not like you would expect Alien 3 to be a side-scrolling shooter, like a really bad Contra knockoff, right? Like that's all you would expect it to be. But instead, they did this top-down thing where you have to destroy all the eggs. Like there's these action adventure aspects to it, and so like they tried something unique and new. Like that's what I like to see is like, and maybe that didn't follow the plot quite as well, but at least they tried to make a cool video game around the property.
So Fittison Toaster on Twitch asks, you said that the biggest crime a game can commit is being so average or boring. What's the most bog standard average game you can think of?
We've had this discussion a lot because we've wanted to do like the gold standard of what we do. I'm kind of tired of our rating section. We're doing a little inside baseball here. And so we were talking about like, what is the most average game we can compare all games to? And we either say it's better or worse than that game. But like, it's hard because there's so many genres. There's so many different types of games. There's so many.
And even between me and John, we couldn't agree what the gold standard for a 5 is.
I've been trying to think of it. I got to look at my NES wall. I'm going to let you talk for a second.
It's just so hard because, like, what do you actually pick? Do you pick a game that's just kind of boring? Like, I've got plenty of games that are boring. Anticipation for the NES is boring, but that doesn't make it, like, the quintessential 5. You know what I mean? Yeah. I think you could take this... You can interpret this game, or this question another way, like, you know, what is the most boring game? I mean, there's pretty boring games out there, but... I kind of like the interpretation of this question as being, you know, what's the most middle of the road?
Yeah. How about this? We need to make this a Twitter thing. Please tweet at us the most 5 out of 10 game you can think of.
And not subjectively. This should be more or less objectively a 5.
Yeah.
People should be able to look at this game and say, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't throw the cartridge out if I had it, but I also don't think I'd ever plug it in.
We will gift a subscription to our Twitch channel to the winner of whoever can think of the most 5 out of 10 game. So that's at stake, that $5 reward. Tweet at us. I want to know, because we've gone through this quite a bit. The funny thing is, like, to my mind, like, Mario Brothers 3 comes to my mind in terms of I think it's a 10 out of 10 game, but it's definitely like a 5 out of 10 of me wanting to play it. Like, I can always take it or leave it. I know you feel the same way. Don't act like...
No, I know, but like at the same time, I know I don't want to play it because I've got like 1,000 other games I want to play, not because it's a 5 out of 10.
No, it's a 10 out of 10. That's the thing. But like, in terms of like, do I want to pop it in or not? It's just like, I could take it or leave it, you know? Like, if you're like, you have to play Mario 3 today, I'm like, okay, that's fine. But it's not like, I'm not like putting on my shoes and whistling, you know. I'm like, sure, okay, whatever. So anyways, so we'll get an answer from
we'll let you guys help us work that out. So Space Cow asks privately, what's a good ratio of break time to play time in a speed run, such as runs less than an hour, greater than an hour? Well, I'll tell you that the objectively correct answer is 0 break time and 100% play time. But unfortunately, as soon as your game gets long enough, you're starting to really crave that break time.
I don't know if I would say that's I really, as a streamer, the break time I like quite a bit because it lets you interact with chat. And in some speed games are objectively harder to be a streamer and play speedrun and engage a chat than others. Like Celeste, I think of with TGH, like he basically can't read the chat and play it at the level he's at because it's nonstop. And that's awesome, but it also makes it hard for him because he wants to interact with his chat.
I think in terms of, all that. So like not focusing on the streaming aspect, not focusing on the sort of getting tired and needing something to focus on, like in terms of it being a speed run, like I want pure gameplay for my speed run. Like Super Mario World is one of my favorite speed runs. And
but
there's 10 seconds at least between every single level.
Yeah. That in my mind is like filled with breaks, and I think that's good because it lets your mind focus on the next level.
You said good, but you meant the word bad.
Oh, bad. Okay. I mean, I think ultimately everybody's hands and mind need breaks to prepare for the next play.
There will be plenty of time to take a break when you go to sleep.
So you're an advocate. You want your speedruns like football from Europe, never stops, and that's one of my favorite sports. And then my other sport, the only sport I like maybe a little bit more than that, American football. They take breaks in between each play, and they think about what they want to do and do that. And so you don't want your speed run.
It must take a lot of thinking to figure out, throw the ball in front of me and try to make sure someone catches it.
Philistine. You know nothing of sports. How dare you? We did meet. What do you call him?
Huh?
It's not Terrell Owens. You call him.
Oh, Terrence Owens.
Terrence Owens. We saw Terrell Owens at SGDQ a few years ago in Minnesota, and all knowing his name properly was calling him Terrence Owens. It was very funny
because it was driving John crazy. I was like, man, you guys remember when we saw Terrence Owens back there?
Terrence Owen, I think is what you called him. But yeah, I can see that. I just think, I mean, if you're talking about a 15-minute run, I can see that. But if I'm running something longer, I need the breaks.
Yeah, you're right,
I
though.
mean,
You're absolutely right, though, because I'm very used to NES speedruns that are like 10 minutes long, and I want there to be no breaks. I want it to be just a pure gaming experience that whole time. Whereas for a game that's 7 hours long, like you're playing, Final Fantasy VII, like you desperately need a moment. Like even for as much less demanding as that game is, sort of gameplay wise, it's just as demanding mentally to be on at all times, and you do need a little bit of a break. So
like I've been streaming that lately, and like you're mashing circles so much, and like I don't mash. The thing is, like, the crazy part of the world record of that run is now it's become like who's gonna mash the hardest for 7.5 hours. And like for such a long time people were like, I'll deal with the RNG, but I'm not gonna try and mash as hard as I can for 7.5 hours. I'm not crazy, right? But now that's become part of the run. I don't do that, but like, that's too much of a break time. I'm sitting like, I could read a book. I'm like, should I start trying to learn a language while I'm running this? Should I start like trying to watch a TV show? Like what? Like, because you're like, I know the next 20 minutes I'm mashing through text and then walking to somewhere I'm mashing through text. And it's like, yeah, I don't like that. So
no,
yeah, I think I want more breaks than you do. I think that I'm lazier than you are.
No, I totally get that. I totally get that.
Last question is from Swede Chick. She says, how do you, John Carls and Author Blues, that's me and you,
on the me and you, got it.
Yeah, she's asking us. Okay. Know each other. Did you meet through speedrunning, streaming, or did you meet like in college or something?
I think it goes back much further than that. We were actually born in the same hospital.
Born in the same uterus. Are you born in a uterus? I don't think you are. No. I think it's
that says so much that you have no idea of female physiology.
I don't know where the babies come from. It's confusing.
No,
so
I get that.
You can tweet me and try and explain that to me too.
Please do not tweet the Frame Savers and try to explain female physiology. I do not want to see that on Twitter.
No, but I think it's really sweet that the question is like, did we go to college or something? Like people think we're so close that like we've been friends forever. I think that's touching. First of all, it's also flattering to me that you would think that I would be able to attend the same college as Chad, because I'm sure Chad went to like science college on the moon with all the smart people. But no, we met through Twitch. Actually, TMR hosted Skybills one day, and that's how I found Skybill's stream. And she was co-op racing Kirby Superstar with you on the SNES. And so that's kind of just how I met both of you. And she was super excited to have me in her stream, not because I had any followers or anybody
because
knew who
you
I
were,
was, but
you
everybody
were a
knew
legend.
Everybody knew me as the TMR guy for like that.
That
month.
Have we ever talked about that story on TFS? Do people know about your legacy? How you
I guess
started?
This could be a good part of. I mean, I guess we've never talked about it. This fits in Q&A, I guess.
Okay.
So the way. Do you want to tell a story? You want me to tell a story?
I'll tell my version of the story that I know it, and then you can correct every part that I'm wrong about.
Okay.
So John was watching TMR play Contra, and John
already wrong.
Okay, which game?
So I was watching TMR race somebody in SMB3.
Oh, really? I always thought it was Contra. Okay, go ahead.
No, and he at the time held the world record in Contra, and I had been watching him do that. And I was not an active chatter in his chat. I didn't talk there. He didn't know who I was at all. He was just somebody I watched.
If you've ever seen John in a Twitch chat, you know how John is in Twitch chats. He's always got some clever thing to say.
Yeah, I'm a little annoying. So
no,
I try and lurk more. I try and lurk when I'm not in the chat. Charming is another word for it. So anyways, I've never talked in his chat before. He doesn't know who I am. And so I typed, "Are you better than me at Contra?" In the middle of this race, there's 600 people watching. Chat's flying by, right? Like, I'm just saying some dumb thing. I don't even think he's going to read it, okay? No kappa, no emojis, just straight question, "Are you better than me at Contra?" And TMR stops in his race on an auto-scroller on the one of those ships where you fight the Cooper brothers and looks at it, and he's like, "Are you better than me at Contra?" And then he's just like, you can see his mind thinking. He has it clipped somewhere. It has a lot of plays. And then he takes like 2 or 3 hits from the boss, not moving, because for some reason he decided to try and analyze this sentence rather than play the game in the race he's in. And somehow I'm to blame, by the way. Dies on this, so he has to redo a 3-minute auto scroller in an SMB3 like tournament race or something. It was like, this is before speed gaming and all that, but it was some sort of race where it was a tournament setting. And so then he like goes off in his TMR way and says a lot of swear words in Spanish and gets really angry, and the chat starts blowing up and people start creating fake John Carl's accounts, and everybody, me just saying one thing in his chat, not even thinking he'd read it, and because maybe a little bit of the language barrier, because I didn't put the kappa in there, he did legitimately not know that I was trolling him, and obviously I'm not better than him at Contra. I've never beaten it without the Konami code, and so it just became this huge thing. And so even now, I still have people coming up to me mentioning this. This is from like 2013, early 2014, like Pro JN. The first time I met him, he's like, "Oh, you're the better than me at Contra guy," and like. That just became like my meme in so many places, and then I became
that legacy lasted for a long time.
Yeah, then I became the John Carls for SMW, and that was my meme. And now I'm just known as the Game Boy person, and there's no meme. It's mostly just like people being really worried about me.
Because
like everybody has like really fun drunk stories, and then there's like, now we're worried about you. Like apparently now I'm at the now we're worried about you stage of speedrunning. So. That's the story. I guess I should find the clip. If you put !Contra in my chat, no, people don't realize this. Nobody uses it. It'll actually have TMR saying John Carls is better than me at Contra. So yeah, it's fun. He still brings it up every time I see him. It's been like 5 years. I don't know how to get away from it. So it is what it is.
So to round out this story, how are we friends now?
So during that time, TMR hosted Skybills. Skybills got real excited that I was in her chat because she knew who I was, and that made her excited for some reason. So she was like, I cannot believe John Carls is in chat. Meanwhile, I have like 37 followers on Twitch, and nobody's watching my very intermittent streams on Mac. And she was racing off, and I secretly found out about their love. It was private at the time. It was not publicly displayed, so I had to keep it. I'm pretty sure everybody knew, and I wasn't special, but she told everybody, and everybody wasn't supposed to publicly talk about it. And eventually they live together. Now they love each other, and it's cute. So that's how we met, and now we're buddies. And when I decided to start the podcast, I said, who do I want to do this podcast with?
But Spike Vegeta wasn't available.
And then after 35, 45 rejections, I came up on the Author Blue section. No, Auth was the first person I thought of. I was like, my second option was Feasel. I want to put that out there. Not my first. Oh. And I was like, he runs a lot of different games. He's got a silly, interesting personality. We had a good rapport. We were doing a race for Speed Gaming League, and we were both kind of ribbing at each other. And it was pretty good entertainment. I felt like I felt like we hit this chemistry, or in this SGL. That's specifically when I remember thinking of the idea, and I was like, he would be a really good co-host. So
nice.
Here we are. So cute story, right?
Yeah, it was adorable.
TMR has it on YouTube. Oh my gosh, I have to click on this real quick. How many plays does it have?
Don't click on it right now. Let's finish the podcast.
He better. If he's making money off that video, I'm just saying, royalties, my boy, royalties.
All right, so that is it for our Q&A section.
Yeah. Absolutely. So where can they find other episodes, my friend?
If you check us out on theframesavers.com, you can find links to us on SoundCloud, on Stitcher, on iTunes, whatever it is that you prefer to use. If you want to use that link, you can also find our YouTube, our Twitter, and our Discord channel. Our Discord channel is a great place to keep up to date on what's going on in our podcast, new episodes coming out, new videos being posted, upcoming episodes, listener selected episodes, things like that. And speaking of listener selected episodes, you can also find a link to our Patreon on www.theframesavers.com. If you check out our Patreon, you can find out ways to support us. We have several different tiers of subscribers, and it helps a lot with paying for some of the costs of running this podcast. One of the things that we do for our subscribers is every time we do a listener selected episode, everyone who is a $5 or more per month patron will be asked to submit games for us to select from for the listener selected episode, and then all of our $1 a month patrons or more will get to vote on that list of games. So we include pretty much all of our patrons in the selection process of producing the listener selected episodes, and you'll definitely want to be involved with those, because I don't know if it's just like this sort of overwhelming guilt or just this morbid.
Like, we have to step our game up, but also you all pick pretty good games, and it makes us really, I think we don't want to like publish an SMB3 episode and it be like meh, and then people are like, all the SMB3 people get angry. Whereas like if this Hobbit episode were meh, only Christian would be mad at us. So it's like there's a lot of pressure on us. But also, like, you just you pick good games, and we've gotten good guests. I mean, we did Zelda 2 was the first one. We've done Dragon Warrior. We did Star Tropics, and what else? Or sorry, Dragon Warrior, Star Tropics. We've
Oh
done one
man,
other one,
I'd
but they've
have to
all
pull
been
up the list.
yeah, they've all been really good.
Let's see. We did
And
Star Tropics. We did number 3 was crap. I just lost out. We did Gimmick was number 2.
Gimmick's the one I missed. So we've done 4 of them. We did Zelda 2, then Gimmick, then Dragon Warrior, then Star Tropics. So
That's right.
kind of a wide variety of games and really cool stuff that I don't know how many of those episodes outside of Zelda 2 we would have. I mean, I think we wanted to do Gimmick for a while. Oh, DuckTales was part of the Gimmick one. We had a tie.
Oh,
but
was
some
it?
of forced us to do episodes that we might not have done otherwise. Like I don't think we would have done a Star Tropics episode, and that ended up being a really good episode. Dragon Warrior was not an episode we were talking about for
I don't think we would have. I mean, even now, I'm not sure we would have ever done that episode. But I'd say to this date, it's probably one of our best ones.
Yeah, so definitely check that out. Consider supporting. For Patreon, you can always drop back out, I guess, if you want after you get the benefits. But we do appreciate all of you who pay every month. We're gonna try and think of some more incentives to help encourage people in that way, or reward the people who are supporting us. But thank you so much that you do that. Also, shout out, did you give a shout out to our 25?
No, I didn't.
Patrons?
So
I got real distracted by the TMR video.
Yeah, so the $25 a month patrons, we also like to give a shout out to their channels, a little promotion for them. They're all fantastic speedrunners. We wouldn't promote them if they sucked. So step up your game, 25 a month patrons, or you're off the list. Tina Hacks, twitch.tv/Tina Hacks, twitch.tv/Mr. Twitch.tv/Kip, KIPP, and twitch.tv/Drex, that's DDRREEXX. Those are all of our $25 a month patrons, and that goes a long way to helping to support all of our projects, paying our producer, things like that, our hosting fees.
And I don't know if we haven't talked about this, but maybe we'll find a way for the listener episode to also roll in our Twitch subscribers. So thank you to anybody who subscribes here on the Twitch channel. We really appreciate it a lot. You can subscribe and get emotes. We have a $5 emote and a $10 emote, so go ahead and check those out. We also just want to give a shout out to our friends at podcast.warp.world. We got Pooh, Xwater, and Jakku, and also Grand Keys. They do Warp World Historians and a Warp World podcast, which is like news and events. So definitely go check them out. It's a really good podcast. We've collaborated together. We've stolen each other's podcasts. It's really good content. It's my new go-to for news. If I want to hear about E3, if I want to hear about, something going on with Dr. Disrespect or something, I'm going to Warp World. I'm not going to any of those other podcasts now. So definitely check that out. Also, check me out at John Carls on Twitter and Twitch. I'm pushing for partners, so try and show up and get me a view.
Yeah,
and
hit him up, my dudes. He's been playing Pokemon, and it has been fantastic streams lately. So.
Yeah. So thank you to all the people who have hosted me and supported me in that. Also, you can find me at John Carls 1. We got our boy Author Blues here at Author Blues on Twitter, Twitch, and the YouTubes. And a huge shout out to our producer Brian Morgenthaler, who always makes this good. You can find him on Twitter and Twitch at bmorgstv. And lastly, shout out to Space Cow 2455 for helping us with the Q&A. Any last thoughts about The Hobbit? You've been wanting to do this for a long time. We're wrapping it up in the books.
Yeah, another one for the books. So I'm definitely getting back to this game. So if this intrigues you at all, definitely check out my channel, and I'll probably be playing it within the next few weeks. Or probably right now if you're listening to the audio version. And one last thing I did want to say, John reminded me, I am going to make sure that the Twitch subscribers can get in on the process of picking for listener selected. The only thing is that I can't use Patreon to send out those messages, so you have to be on our Discord server. If you are a Twitch subscriber and you want to be involved in the selection process, you can be involved. You just have to make sure you're on our Discord server.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's just the way that Patreon works with sending messages and stuff. There's no API call that we can connect over to, Twitch subscriptions. So it'll need to be a little bit more manual. But if you want to be involved and you are a sub, please hit us up. Let us know. And I think, do we have a sub-only chat in the Discord as well?
Yeah.
We'll probably hit it up so we can hit you all up there. So I think that's it for this. Definitely check out The Hobbit and tweet at us what you think our most 5 out of 10 game is in the world, and tweet at us about your 12-hour challenges. We want to hear about it. Maybe we can read some 12-hour challenge experiences next.
Oh, that'd be wonderful. Yeah, let us know.
Yeah, tweet or email us your 12-hour challenge, experiences, what game you ran, and kind of what your experience was, and we might read a couple next episode. We'll try and tweet out about that. But until then, we'll see you later.
Peace.